Yes, I'm actually, we're all prepared. We're hoping.
Good evening. I'll call this meeting to order. If we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Hagley.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Vice Mayor Harrod.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here. And if you could join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Report on closed session. We did not have a closed session. Announcements and presentations. So we have a proclamation recognizing September 2025 as National Service Dog Month, which I will read. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg recognizing the month of September 2025 as National Service Dog Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas canine companions believe in the joyful, transformative power of the human-canine bond and inclusivity of all citizens, and in the United States, 64 million adults and children have a disability, and only 16,000 service dogs from accredited training programs exist nationwide, and the need is growing. And Canine Companions is a nonprofit organization that enhances the lives of people with disabilities by providing expertly trained service dogs and ongoing support to ensure quality partnerships. And Canine Companions and their service dogs empower people with disabilities to lead life with greater independence by providing best-in-class training, ongoing follow-up services, and a deeply committed community of support. And National Service Dog Month aims to educate our community about the benefits of service dogs and the laws protecting them. Whereas the City Council encourages all cities to celebrate service dogs and be respectful of the rights afforded to the adults, children, and veterans who lead more independent lives because of their assistance. So now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby recognizes the month of September 2025 as National Service Dog Month in the City of Healdsburg in recognition of service dogs and the adults and children with disabilities in our community. And do we have Ben here to receive this proclamation? Ben and Friend, you're a service dog. And what's the dog's name?
His name is Mateo.
Mateo.
It's like potato. Sit. Good evening, council members, city leaders, members of the community. My name is Ben, and this is my service dog, Mateo. I am a former staff sergeant and a veteran of the United States Air Force. I am a disabled veteran with PTSD. I grew up here in the hills of Sonoma County, graduating in high school in the town of Sonoma. After 9/11, I joined the military to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. After basic training, I began my career as an aircraft mechanic and was stationed in Oklahoma. Once I got the hang of that, I applied for a special duty assignment in South Korea for a few years. Once I got the hang of that, I was sent to Andrews Air Force Base to support the Vice President, the First Lady, and other national dignitaries and continue my service to our country. Once I completed my enlistment, I separated and went to college to learn occupational health and safety. I returned back to Sonoma County, and in the 13 years since my departure, many things had changed. It had taken me a while, but I realized that I had also changed during my time serving. And there was a gentleman named Howard Osterkamp, a Korean War veteran who was often attributed to the phrase, "some gave and some gave all." Those sacrifices to those who had given their lives to our country. And as I stand here talking, this weighs heavily on my mind. While serving in the military, I experienced a great deal of loss. And while I was able to return and contribute to society, I still struggled and looked for relief. There were moments when I was unable to. So in 2001, I realized I needed help and I wasn't quite sure who to ask. So realizing the first step, I had learned about canine companions. They later offered to help veterans who suffered from PTSD, and I was accepted. A year and a half later, I was paired with Mateo. One of the first things I learned about him was that he likes treats. I also like treats, and I carry them in my pocket. The second thing I learned about Mateo is that he was able to save my life. Since being paired with Mateo, my quality of life has improved. I feel better about myself and I'm more active. And while I do still have hard moments, they do not always feel alone. And my friend Mateo, he gets to come to work with me every day. I currently serve as the Utility and Compliance Safety Coordinator for the City of Healdsburg. My role is to ensure the safety of those who serve this community and that they are kept safe to perform their tasks that keep the lights on, water in your tap, and the parks kept green and looking beautiful. It had taken me some time to admit that I needed help, to ask for it and get it. So here today you can see my dog Mateo, and he is my friend. And in the moments that I do not think I can, Mateo helps me realize that I can. September Service Dog Awareness Month. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the City of Healdsburg Council for allowing me to share my story. My name is Ben, and I'm a veteran, and this is my service dog. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Could you and Mateo come up here and get a picture with the council?
Of course, he loves pictures.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so now we move to city manager reports. City Manager Kay.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, my thanks to the council for that recognition and to Ben and Mateo for coming in after hours to join us. It's something multiple years running now. I know I appreciate recognizing at this time of year. I have 3 updates for you, I think. Unfortunately, it's becoming a theme that we're talking about strike team deployments in the last few meetings, and the council's already aware of this, but I did want to share publicly that once again, we've just deployed a team from our fire department over the last week or so, this time much closer to home to the Pickett fire. This was engine 6361, staffed by Captain John Sullivan, excuse me, engineer Justin Potter and firefighter Mike Jacobs. They've just returned home. Everybody is safe and all equipment is in good shape, but they were out on the Pickett fire near Calistoga for 8 days, involved in various phases of the response and the mop up. As the council's aware, we do when we can try to participate in calls for strike teams and mutual aid. We're a small department that can be challenging sometimes, but we do, our chief and our team does a good job of making sure we backfill. I've said this before, I'll keep saying it. We always make sure we're fully staffed and fully operational here at home before we send teams out, but it was important for us to be able to serve and respond in that response. So again, everybody's back home safely, and I'll just offer my thanks and appreciation to the team that went out there. In addition to backfilling our staffing here, which is critical, and from time to time, we actually can't do that and aren't available for staff teams, for strike teams. But in addition to prioritizing that, I also want to note that those costs for strike team deployments are reimbursed through the California Office of Emergency Services. So we are generally speaking made whole for those deployments. It's just a question of getting resources out there. But I just wanted to share with the council and the community that we did participate in that response, which was obviously fairly local and part of our regional neighborhood. Second update, the council is probably aware that Climate Action Healdsburg will be hosting a Sunday celebration later this month, and there will be a proclamation for that at the next city council meeting. I wanted to note two specific aspects of that event that directly involves city staff that will be coming up later this month. On September 16th at 7 p.m., our acting utilities director, Patrick Foos, will be presenting on the city's progress toward moving toward clean energy sources. You've all heard a lot and participated in a lot of discussions about how we're shifting the makeup of our energy, and he'll be providing a presentation on that. And then a couple of days later, on September 18th, our wastewater superintendent, Rob Skates, and utility conservation analyst, Tara Sampson, will conduct a tour of our floating solar array at the water reclamation facility. So I know you've all enjoyed that tour, but it's a great opportunity for the general public to get out there and have a look at that. It's one of those facilities we have that many of us never think about unless something goes amiss, but it's really, as you all know, a fascinating and sort of striking installation of a whole lot of solar panels floating water reclamation ponds. So a good opportunity for people to get out there and see what the city's doing. And then the General Sun Day event will be on Sunday, September 21st. So a few things going on that week that I wanted to draw your attention to. And then also that weekend on the preceding Saturday, just a heads up that Creek Week is coming, and the annual Foss Creek cleanup will be held on Saturday, September 20th. So we always have great participation from local school groups who are out there cleaning up as much as we try. There's always a lot of stuff to get out of the creek, and it's a great community building effort and a chance for all of us to come together and make a really noticeable impact, right? We track and weigh all of the stuff that comes out of the creek, and it's significant. So wanted to make sure you're aware that that's coming up later this month. Once again, at the next council meeting, we'll have a little bit more information and a proclamation recognizing that, but I just wanted to let you know and put it on your calendars. I think that's all I have. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. We have questions? Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Not a question, just a comment. Just wanted to share that I think I can speak for everybody that that we're concerned about the fire department this time of year. We know this is a stressful time for you guys, and we thank you and always have our best wishes for your continued safety.
Thank you. So, okay, we'll move on then to public comments on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest, not on the agenda, but related to City Council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the City Council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Would anybody like to make public comment at this time? Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Alan Wolves, and I'm with both Sonoma County for Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace Sonoma County. I'm here today to ask you to do something about what I consider to be the biggest blight upon Sonoma County in our community, the General Dynamics factory at 511 Grove Street. General Dynamics is the third largest federal government contractor, making both weaponry like the MK-84 2,000-pound bombs, which are currently being dropped in Gaza on houses, hospitals, and innocent children, and surveillance technology used by ICE for purposes of tearing apart families here in Sonoma County and the rest of the United States. Back in 2023, when the genocide on Gaza began, we went around to every city council trying to get them to adopt ceasefire resolutions to send the message that we don't support the use of our tax dollars being used to commit genocide. We were told by just about everyone that they would not act on our request because it's not a local issue. Katati was the only one that had the courage to actually pass that. Well, this is a local issue. These evil technologies being used to slaughter children and tear apart families are being made right in our backyard, right around the corner from here. We are directly responsible for letting this happen. I've heard the response from some council members that they agree with us but have no power to do anything about it. I believe that's absolutely false and just an attempt at passing the buck. Back in March, the Healdsburg City Council banned big box stores, chain restaurants, and other, quote, formula businesses, which it defines as stores that have 10 or more identical locations. General Dynamics has well over 10 locations. In fact, it's very common practice in the weapons industry in the United States to spread apart manufacturing as much as possible, so as to be seen as creating jobs in all of those different areas, which then curries favor with whichever politician is representing that area. These politicians then go on to vote for every single bill that sends more weapons to Israel, which is why General Dynamics has been making record profits since the genocide began. If the Healdsburg City Council has the ability to ban stores selling gigantic bulk packages of toilet paper, I am sure they can find a way to ban factories making the technology that's allowing ICE to rip our communities, including those picking our precious grapes, to shreds, or making the bombs that are literally tearing limbs off children in Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have someone else who'd like to make public comment? Welcome.
You. I'm Jacqueline, Ed's consul. We met last time I was here. The right of citizens to freely express their grievances and concerns, as well as ideas for how to make their communities thrive and not just survive, within the container of open public comment is a right I don't take lightly, because it's one that's been stripped from so many in city halls across the so-called United States. So to begin with, thank you. Thank you for being the kinds of leaders who refuse to suppress or bully or intimidate in any way the voices of your constituents from speaking freely about what grieves them. This is a democratic process. And in a time when our nation continues to spiral into fascism, we in Healdsburg are not living in a bubble of safety, set apart from the disease of fascism. We're very much a part of the problem, but we are also uniquely positioned and abundantly capable of being a part of the solution of making this world a safer place for our kids to grow up in. There comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. This is from human rights activist, anti-apartheid freedom fighter, and Anglican Bishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa. It doesn't get much more upstream from mass human suffering than to be situated in a town that exports bombs to kill children and journalists in Palestine. The city of Healdsburg, California is hosting General Dynamics, who design, manufacture, and profit off of munitions and surveillance technology used by Israel to annihilate tens of thousands of Palestinians in order to steal their land. 63,000 civilians murdered. For context, that's like if every single woman, man, child, and baby living currently in Healdsburg were murdered by an invading military, multiplied by 5. 2 million people displaced and dying from forced starvation. This is settler colonization and genocide, much like the genocide of the indigenous peoples of this land that we now occupy. It is time to end this cycle of violence and white supremacy. It is time to stop poisoning the river. Healdsburg is complicit in genocide as long as we allow General Dynamics to do business here. I'm calling on this council to hold a vote to ban any weapons manufacturers who profit from genocide, terrorism, and human suffering locally or abroad. Just a few months ago, you found a will and a way to ban retail chain box stores from operating anywhere near our plaza. General Dynamics sells missiles that are being used today to terrorize vulnerable children and families. You have a choice. Use your power to ban weapons manufacturers from enjoying real estate near our post office, our family health club, our plaza, or anywhere in our town. We want them out. Remove the poison from the river. Use your power to make the world a safer and more just place. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. Free Palestine.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Ian, and I'm here also to speak about the defense contractor that has unfortunately been allowed to make immense profits off of genocide and immigrant family separation right here in this community. I think it's a great disservice to the people of Healdsburg that this entity is allowed to operate while providing products that harm both global and local communities. Bombs that rip children and families apart in Palestine, artillery, and surveillance technology for ICE that rips families apart here. When informed of the existence of such a facility in their own community, many residents are alarmed. It is clear as day that General Dynamics does not benefit the community of Healdsburg or its residents, and is in fact driving the many horrors we see unfolding today, both global and local. It is my belief, and the shared belief of many others in this community, that such an entity has no business here in Healdsburg, and I urge you to take action and ensure that our communities and our world are safe from defense contractors like General Dynamics, and we demand that they and any other contractor like them are not allowed to operate in Healdsburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Public comment? Not seeing anyone come forward. I do see someone coming forward. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I want to speak to the idea of what is a local business. And on Tuesdays in the Plaza, I went to probably 2/3 of those concerts. And every time there are vendors that provide food service to the patrons or the people who are interested in going to those concerts. And last Tuesday, on one side of Plaza Street was Healdsburg, which is clearly a local business. And on the other side was something called Rose's Brats and Burgers, which I have no idea how delicious they are, but I'm sure they are worthy, which was apparently out of Santa Rosa. And so when you see the flyer for Tuesdays in the Plaza, one of the benefits that is identified is that local vendors have food stuff available. And yet, apparently, the focus is on convenience for the attendees of the concert, because Healdsburger was maybe 30 feet from Iggy's Burger, and maybe 70 feet from Goodnights, and 150 feet from Kinsmoke, and about the same from Pizzando. Every single one of those establishments sells a burger. And my question is, why does the city actively encourage competition against local businesses? It may be unrealistic to think that those 4 restaurants that serve burgers can serve the several thousand people who show up. And yet, how many of them want a burger, or for that matter, a pizza? Because you could also get that to go from Roof 106. And so I'm not quite sure that I want to suggest that community services become the food police and decide who can and can't come in and put a booth in that plaza. But I also think I'm going to have to talk to my friends who own restaurants and et cetera to come up with a new idea. And I'm going to call it Takeout Tuesdays. And anyone who wants to can pre-order a meal with a specific time that you're going to pick it up on Tuesday. And if you happen to be going to the plaza, that would be good, but maybe you just don't want to cook that evening. And every single business, if someone was doing that in advance, would know how many customers and how many burgers or pizzas they need to hand out. And so I just want to when 4 weeks ago, there was an amazing presentation about how a local preference in income limited housing. And it demonstrates the city's ability when they're really focused on a local benefit, they can deliver amazing results. Why doesn't that apply to local businesses? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hi there. My name is Summer White. I've come today to stand in solidarity with others and here tonight and community members that have spoken out against general dynamics in our community. I too believe that the existence of this business casts a dark shadow on this beautiful community, and I feel that it's important for us to continue to question its existence and our priorities as a community and how we want to present ourselves to those who live here, those who travel here, those that view us as this idealized community. And yeah, I'm just here speaking from without any notes, speaking from the heart of really just encouraging this council to hear your constituents when they speak out against a business that is inherently destructive to our global society. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, so I'll close public comment and we'll move to motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call vote? Can you do that? Did I?
Councilmember Edwards?
Oh, I just seconded.
Oh, really, I'm not very good at this. Councilmember Hagley?
Say yes, she's doing a roll call vote.
Roll call.
This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And so we go to public hearings. We do not have any public hearings. We do have old business, however. Update on the recent housing legislation. Scott Vivian of Community Development Director to give us a report.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Mitchell.
Hey, Scott, if I could stop you. We're working through a momentary technical difficulty. Less than a minute, I think, but I'll ask the council to just bear with us for 1 second and we'll get the presentation.
We need to adjourn for a minute. Is that what you're saying?
If you're okay, sitting tight for a moment. I
We'll
think
just sit here tight.
We can
for
just sit
sure.
here awkwardly for a second.
Okay.
And we'll try and get it up there.
Hang on, everyone.
Thank you, and I apologize.
We're doing a commercial. Here we go. We were going to play a song, but we'll do that. We'll save it for next time.
You don't want to hear my singing voice?
No.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Mitchell, council members, Scott Diven, Community Development Director, and I'm here this evening to talk about some relatively recent updates regarding state housing legislation that allows really for an increase in housing above and beyond what our local land use code and general plan allow for. So can I have the next slide? The recommended action this evening is to receive and discuss a presentation from city staff on recent changes to California housing laws. Next slide. As you may recall, back in May of 2023, the city adopted its housing element, which was certified by the state. One of the policies within that housing element is policy 1.6, which states, evaluate and where appropriate, increase minimum housing density requirements for residential and mixed-use land use element designations and corresponding zoning districts. To that end, back in 2024, we had a small planning effort called the Downtown Housing Capacity Study, where we looked at what that type of increase in density would look like in the context of the character of Healdsburg. And then secondly, we also submitted for a grant with MTC, their Transit Oriented Communities Planning Grant, and we successfully received that. And that will allow us to plan for the area surrounding the future SMART station. Both of those planning efforts that I just mentioned, those take a considerable amount of time and effort among staff and the community as we work through those. However, there are some changes in state housing laws that just over the past few years mandate opportunities for infill development at higher densities and with a streamlined approval process that are effective immediately without these longer term planning efforts that we are still going to continue to embark on. Incorporating these changes into our local ordinances, along with some objective design standards, can help ensure that future development continues to reflect community goals despite the lack of discretion from the state. Next slide. So the first one that I'd like to talk about this evening is Senate Bill 9. I think you've all heard about that on a couple of different occasions. That bill was effective January 1st, 2022, and it was called the Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency Act, or HOME Act. And this act is really interesting in that it effectively eliminated single-family zoning throughout the state of California. And what SB 9 does is it mandates that local agencies approve qualifying housing projects ministerially, meaning without discretionary review or public hearings. And the city must approve or deny a complete application within 60 days of receiving it. If we don't respond within 60 days of a complete application, then it's automatically deemed approved by the state. What SB 9 does is it allows for homeowners to construct up to 2 residential units on any lot that's currently zoned for single-family residential. Hence the elimination of single-family zoning, because now you can have 2 units on any single-family zoned lot. The law also allows for the subdivision of an existing single-family residential lot into 2 separate parcels, each of which can host up to 2 units. So that potentially allows for 4 units on what previously was 1 single-family lot. And so in the city of Healdsburg, that's any lot that's zoned R1. So there's R1 3500, R1 6000, 20,000, et cetera. So all of those lots are subject to this new law. There's a couple of provisions within that Senate bill. Lots that are split need to be split roughly in half, with a smaller lot at least 40% of the original lot size, so they need to be generally equal. And each new lot needs to be at least 1,200 square feet in size. So our R1 3500, for example, would be a small enough lot to allow these kind of lot splits. In terms of unit sizes that are built on those, the state requires that the primary unit to be at least 800 square feet in size, and there is currently no upper limit on the unit size in the legislation. Next slide. Senate Bill 9 also reduces the setback requirements. It allows only for a maximum 4-foot side and rear yard setback for new construction. That contrasts a bit from our current regulations, which require a 5-foot setback typically on the sides and a 20-foot setback on the rear. So it's not as big of an impact on the side, but it certainly is in terms of the rear yard setbacks. There's a big change in parking in that the city cannot require more than 1 automobile parking space per unit, or any parking spaces if the parcel that's subject to SB 9 is located within a half mile of a major transit stop, which in the city of Healdsburg, SMART qualifies as a major transit stop. One of the things in SB 9 is that for these lot splits, the applicant must sign an affidavit stating their intent to occupy one of the housing units as their primary residence for a minimum of 3 years. So essentially, in order to do these lot splits and create these additional units, you're really asking property owners to play the role of developer. And that's a very difficult and challenging task because it comes with not just process, but also with costs. And as a result, we're not seeing a lot, not just Healdsburg, but statewide, a lot of people taking advantage of SB 9. We've had 4 applications. All 4 of those were for lot splits, and only one of them actually included any additional development as part of that initial application. And they were also, with the exception of one of them, on parcels that could have done a lot split under our existing general plan and zoning. So people are taking advantage of it more as a faster, more expedited review process as opposed to something that they necessarily need. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on this. The state, I think, similar to ADU law, which changes every now and then, will probably continue to look at SB 9 and change its provisions. And one of the things they've talked about is removing that owner occupancy requirement, which could result in more people, probably more developers being interested in looking at lots and doing these types of splits. So
We will keep you updated if that arises in the future. There are some exemptions and protections within SB 9. The law does include safeguards to prevent the displacement of existing tenants and excludes properties in historic districts or properties with any environmental constraints such as flood zones, steep hillsides, and very high severity fire zones from being allowed to take advantage of SB 9. And the Senate bill also does allow for objective design standards. So since our discretion has been removed, if we develop objective design standards, which are clearly defined, measurable criteria used to regulate the physical appearance and layout of buildings, we can hopefully align those projects more with the community values, design values that we've adopted over the years. So in short, our design guidelines that the community worked so hard on don't apply to these projects. And so most of those are considered subjective because there is some certain level of subjectivity in our interpretation of them. So we need to come up with more kind of black and white, clear, concise guidelines. Next slide. Another bill that was adopted at the same time as SB 9 is SB 10. Also effective on January 1st, 2022, and it was referred to as local upzoning for housing. SB 10 is a streamlined tool for increasing housing capacity near transit and jobs, so it's limited in areas to similar to that carve-out that I talked about in SB 9. It needs to be within a half-mile radius of the smart rail station. It's voluntary for jurisdictions as opposed to SB 9, which is mandatory. However, if Healdsburg were to go down the path of SB 10, we'd have to adopt an ordinance. And that ordinance would allow for up to 10 units per parcel within eligible areas. And as part of that ordinance, we'd have to define what those eligible areas are or specific parcels that would be allowed to take advantage of that upzoning. That rezoning under SB 10 is not subject to CEQA. And ADUs and junior ADUs do not count towards the 10-unit cap. And that's important because if you can do 10 units and you can do 10 ADUs, for all intents and purposes, you've got the potential for 20 units on an area that might have only allowed 1 unit previously. So it's important to note that once you go down this path, the density cannot be reduced on a parcel that's been upzoned by Senate Bill 10. And also that Senate Bill 10 sunsets on January 1st, 2029, unless it's extended. But what sunsets in 2029 is your ability to adopt a SB 10 ordinance. If you do adopt an SB 10 ordinance, that does not expire at that point. That would remain in effect. In terms of effectiveness, SB 10, we're not recommending it. I've done some research, and as far as I can ascertain, nobody within the state of California has adopted an SB 10 ordinance. A couple larger jurisdictions looked into it, but when they were presented to their communities, it didn't carry any weight. And since then, the next two pieces of legislation that I'm going to talk about, in many ways, supersedes the benefits of going through the process of adopting a specific ordinance. With that, we'll go to the next slide. So Senate Bill 684, which is known as the Starter Home Revitalization Act, similar to SB 9, mandates that local agencies provide ministerial approval of qualifying housing projects and also within 60 days of a complete application. What Senate Bill 684 does is it allows for the development of 10 or fewer residential units on urban lots that are under 5 acres that are zoned for multifamily residential. So in Healdsburg, lots that are zoned for multifamily residential are not just multifamily residential zoned, but it's also our commercial districts which allow for multifamily residential. For this one, it provides that the newly created lots must be no smaller than 600 square feet. That means that a 6,000 square foot lot could be subdivided into 10 very small lots. And these aren't just for multifamily units. You could actually do these as individual fee title lots with their own units separate. So that probably wouldn't work at 600 square feet, but certainly in some of these larger parcels, you could see a multifamily zone parcel subdivided and used for 10 single family lots. The unit size, unlike SB9, there is a limit. This, being the Starter Home Revitalization Act, the goal is to reduce the unit sizes to hopefully make them more enticing or more affordable to the missing middle, which has always been a concern of Healdsburg. And they do that by a provision that says that the average total area of floor space of any of the proposed units may not exceed 1,750 net habitable square feet. So you wouldn't be able to subdivide into a bunch of 3,000 square foot luxury homes using this, this bill. In terms of density and development standards, it mandates that developments achieve at least the maximum allowable residential density of a parcel, and also prohibits local agencies from imposing height limits that are lower than the existing zoning. Next slide. In addition, with regard to side and rear yard setbacks, the rear and side yard setbacks shall also equal 4 feet, similar to SB 9. There's no setback required between units themselves, except that required by the California Building Code. And that kind of depends on what type of fire rated wall you have. So it could mean a 0-foot setback or typically a 3-foot setback between units. Similar to SB 9, jurisdictions can develop objective design standards in order to align the project design with community values. It does include tenant protections. The bill includes safeguards to prevent this displacement of existing tenants by prohibiting the removal of housing that is low income, rent controlled, or has been occupied by tenants within the last 5 years. Again, it impacts parking. We cannot require more than 1 automobile parking space per unit, or any parking spaces if it's within a half mile of a major transit stop. And in this case, that would be SMART. In terms of environmental standards, the site cannot be located on prime farmland, wetlands, within a very high fire hazard severity zone, a special flood hazard area, or a delineated earthquake fault zone. This next piece is kind of a policy discussion, which we'll return to the Planning Commission and Council with, but the bill does not require the city to permit an ADU or JDUs on parcels created through SB 684. So similar to what I had mentioned under Senate Bill 10, if you were to approve 10 units, you wouldn't necessarily have to approve 10 ADUs in addition to that. So that kind of becomes a policy discussion in terms of what level of intensity the city is interested in seeing these projects develop at. Next slide. Senate Bill 1123 is a revision or expansion of 684, and it amended a few of the different provisions in there, and I'll talk about that in the next couple slides. So interestingly, this Senate bill extends SB 684's streamlined approval process to vacant lots that are zoned for single-family residential use. It has a different lot and parcel size regulations for that. It limits eligible parcels to a maximum of 1.5 acres in size and requires any newly created parcels to be no smaller than 1,200 square feet. It permits alternative homeowner structures, including tenancies in common and community land trusts, to try and facilitate diverse and affordable housing options. Again, it clarifies and specifies that ADUs and JADUs, if permitted, are not counted toward the 10-unit cap, encouraging additional housing flexibility and intensity. It also changed that requirement that it meet the maximum allowable residential density and lowered that to 66% of the maximum allowable residential density. And it maintains an exemption from discretionary review as well as CEQA for qualifying projects. Next slide. We're under the belief and understanding that SB 9, SB 684, and SB 1123, which all require ministerial approval of small-scale subdivisions and associated development within 60 days of an application, provided all those state statutory requirements are met, has an implication for the growth management ordinance. In that these bills prevent the city from being able to enforce local standards, including the GMO permit cap. For example, if the city were to reach its building permit cap within any given cycle under the GMO and received an application for a project that meets all the requirements of this legislation, denial would likely violate state law. So as we come forward with ordinances to implement these new laws, we're recommending including this exemption within the SB 9 and the SB 684-1123 ordinances to ensure consistent application of the state housing law as well as the growth management ordinance. But we also understand that this is a sensitive issue, and we are seeking input from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, an interpretation from them as to whether our interpretation is in fact accurate. So that's still forthcoming at this point in time. I'm working with City Attorney Zutler's team on crafting that request. Next slide. Another area to discuss this evening is there's been some changes to the state density bonus law. Those were effective back in January of 2024. And just as an update or a reminder of how the state density bonus law works is under state density bonus law, if you provide additional affordable housing, depending on the amount of affordable housing you provide and the depth of that affordability, you can get an additional percentage of units above the base zoning or base general plan density. What Assembly Bill 1287 did is it created a new stackable density bonus, which allows developers to receive an additional density bonus ranging from 20 to 50% on top of the existing maximum of 50% if they provide even more affordable units than were previously required. So by meeting the affordable housing requirements for both the initial maximum density bonus and this new stackable bonus under Assembly Bill 1287, a project in theory could achieve a total density bonus of 100%. So if you are currently allowed 32 units under the general plan, for example, you could increase that to 64 units, but you're going to have a certain percentage of those units be deed restricted affordable. And depending on what you're proposing, that's more or fewer units depending on the depth of affordability. So deeper affordability, less affordable units required to meet that obligation. In addition, it increased the number of incentives or concessions that are available to qualifying projects from 2 to 4. Incentives or concessions are basically deviations from our development standards and our zoning requirements. And the developer simply needs to ask for those and show that how they kind of will benefit the economic feasibility of their project. Examples of those concessions can be a reduction in parking, the argument being that every parking space costs money, and so that increases the feasibility of the project. Height limits is another common concession or incentive that developers ask for in these projects as well. The Assembly Bill redefined maximum allowable residential density to mean the highest number of units that are permitted under applicable zoning, specific plans, or general plans. So if there's any inconsistency amongst any of those plans, it's whatever the highest potential density is that the density bonus would be based on. And the density bonus is applicable to both rental and for sale housing developments, including alternative ownership structures like tenancies in common, community land trusts, and the hope there on their part is to broaden the scope of projects that can benefit from these enhanced density bonuses. Next slide. Senate Bill 2011 is, as I alluded to earlier, yet another update to state accessory dwelling unit laws. That was effective on January 1st of 2025. It expands opportunities for constructing accessory dwelling units on properties that are zoned for multifamily residential. Prior ADU law allowed for 2 detached accessory dwelling units per lot with an existing multifamily dwelling. What SB 1211 does is it allows up to 8 detached accessory dwelling units, provided that the total number does not exceed the number of pre-existing units on the property. So for example, if there's a property with 6 multifamily dwelling units, they could do 6 accessory dwelling units now, where they previously could only do 2. If you have 10 accessory dwelling units on a property, multifamily units, you'd still be limited to that 8 units. And if it's a vacant parcel with a proposed multifamily dwelling unit, it goes back to the original, which is you can only have 2 detached ADUs. And I think part of the rationale behind that is most smart developers would say that they're, let's say in an 8-unit multifamily would say they're doing 4 units and then 4 ADUs, because those ADUs obviously have lower impact fees and other benefits. So if it's a new project, it's not, there's no new benefit from this Senate bill. And similar to some of the previous pieces of legislation that we discussed, there's impacts on parking as well. Senate Bill 1211 prohibits requiring replacement of off-street parking spaces if an uncovered parking space, which is essentially a driveway or a parking space within a multifamily project, is demolished in conjunction with the construction of or is converted to an accessory dwelling unit. Next slide. I also wanted to bring up Assembly Bill 130, which was enacted as part of the 2024 budget trailer bill back in, in July, I believe. It includes, among other things, changes to the California Environmental Quality Act. With respect to CEQA, it creates a new statutory exemption for infill housing developments up to 20 acres in size if the project is, 1, located in incorporated cities or defined urbanized areas, which Healdsburg is previously developed or surrounded by urban uses, which is the case for most Healdsburg parcels, is consistent with the local general plan or zoning or both, and meets minimum density requirements of 15 units to the acre in a metropolitan area, 10 acres or 10 units per acre in suburban, or 5 units per acre in non-metro. Healdsburg would qualify or require the 10 units per acre suburban piece. It does have exclusions with regard to the demolition of historic structures, sensitive lands or hazardous sites, and cannot be used for hotels and transient lodging. This statutory exemption already exists for parcels that are 5 acres or less, so it just makes this available to larger size parcels. In the city of Healdsburg, we don't have a lot of large parcels, so I don't think this is going to have too much of an impact in terms of exempting projects from CEQA review. And then any future larger parcels that were to get rezoned, they would be subject to CEQA. Mixed use projects, as well as comprehensive plans, such as a general plan update or a new specific plan, would still require CEQA review. So it's really just for infill residential projects. Next slide. Then the next question is there more to come? And interestingly, there's SB 79, which is called a Transit-Oriented Development Bill. This was introduced in January of 2025, and it passed the California Senate in June of 2025, and has been moving through the Assembly. And as of this morning, it actually just was approved out of Assembly with some amendments. And one of the biggest amendments as part of that, as I was reading, is that they've removed the Tier 3 out of the bill, which would have applied to the Smart Rail Corridor. And so this bill is actually not going to have an impact on Healdsburg, but I thought I would quickly just kind of review what it would have done had the Tier 3 rail corridors been included. So next slide, please. It would have established density requirements that increase with proximity to the rail station. So within a half mile of the smart station, it would have required 60 units per the acre. Within a quarter mile of the smart station, it would then allow for up to 80 units per acre. And then parcels that were immediately adjacent to the station would allow for 100 units per acre. Obviously, that would have been a very a drastic change for the city of Healdsburg, and in a pretty intense upzoning. I mentioned this and kept this as part of the presentation this evening, just to point out that the state is really focused on addressing the housing crisis. And in doing so, they're taking away a lot of local control in the process that may have benefits for some, but impacts for others. They're also trying to develop new laws that really encourage housing in proximity to transit, in a reflection of this interest in basically getting a return on the investment that they're putting into all these transit systems. They want to see ridership in and around these stations where so much state and public money is being focused. So this probably isn't the last that we hear of SB 79. There's a new Assembly bill or Senate bill that could show up in the future that does something similarly, but maybe at a smaller scale that's more appropriate for the smart rail corridor in other more suburban areas. But I think it's important for the council to be aware of these, and as staff, we continue to try and continue to monitor legislation and monitor these things and do what we can to ensure that we're implementing them consistent with state law, but that we're also trying to make sure that Healdsburg's community character and its goals and desires are still met despite all of the lack of discretion. So next slide. To that end, as I noted throughout the presentation, in order to effectively implement these changes in state law, we're looking to update our land use code by preparing a series of ordinances. We'll do an ordinance for SB 9, a combined ordinance or an ordinance that combines the provisions of SB 684 and 1123. We're going to update our density bonus ordinance, which is woefully out of date. It's actually a program within the housing element to update our state density bonus ordinance. So we'll do that. And we'll make the required changes to our existing ADU ordinance. And we do have a tentative schedule for that work. We're looking at having a planning commission workshop later this month so that they can wrestle with all these changes. And we plan on approaching them with some of the kind of key policy decisions that they can provide recommendations to the council. We then have a planning commission hearing on those ordinances, and then would come to the city council for a first reading of the ordinances in November, and follow that up with a second reading at the second meeting in December. So the goal is to kind of have these wrapped up by the end of this calendar year. Along with that, we'll be updating the city's website to help the Healdsburg community and the development community understand the opportunities that are presented by these new laws, which have the potential to increase the supply of missing middle housing in Healdsburg. And with that, I know I've thrown a whole lot of stuff at you, and I'm more than happy to answer questions and provide any clarifications as needed. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Yes, it is a lot of information, and I appreciate the way you put it to us. I'm sure council has questions for you. Who wants to start? Ron?
I'll kick it off. When we're looking at these, it looks like there have been some of these projects that have gone through with negative impacts on the community. Is there anything that a community can do if they see that there would definitely be an impact of no parking, or is it just too bad?
No, I mean, these are the state law. In this case, trumps that. So what we want to do, there isn't that much we can do with it. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that at the end of the day, these projects need to be marketable. And in a more suburban environment like Healdsburg that doesn't have as robust of a transit or alternative transportation network, if people want these to be rentable or for people to purchase them, they probably are going to want to have at least a parking spot for each unit in order to attract people, but it's not a requirement.
So I guess in a way, the protection of this would be as some of these projects go forward and there's no parking and they're not rented, that would kind of be the self-correction of the market, we would hope.
In theory, yeah.
Okay, on that one. And it sounds like this could start encouraging some small real estate groups. You said it would be hard for a homeowner to take on the development process. Is there anything that would stop like a real estate investment group from going around and creating these projects where they see them? Possibilities?
So for SB 9, that requirement that the property owner lives on site for at least 3 years kind of prevents that. There's also some provisions with SB 9 that a developer or a similar or a related party cannot do a SB 9 project on an adjacent parcel. So you couldn't go in and buy a couple of parcels and then chop them up into 2 parcels each and then add 2 units on each of those. So
you could go in as a group and buy a parcel and then develop it under these guidelines.
One of you would have to live there for at least 3 years. So, and typically that's,
We've seen what happens when it's a requirement to have somebody, an equity partner or somebody be ahead. So I was just curious.
it becomes difficult for us to monitor that requirement. And that's been part of the critique of SB 9. Now, 684 and 1123, the ones that allow for the purchase of and subdivision of, or not necessarily the purchase, but the subdivision of existing parcels for up to 10 units. Absolutely, those are ripe for small scale infill developers to seek out. And I neglected to point out, I had notes in my presentation, but I wasn't following them, that we did have a 684 1123 project. It was on Ward Street. That was approved as required once we received a complete application, and it was for 6 units on an existing parcel. So they don't have any development proposed as part of that, but our understanding is that they would have 6 small scale homes as part of that.
And then how about impact of neighborhoods as far as, we'd like to get Ward Street is not in the greatest shape, the street wise. Would this new project have to contribute to any of that?
Part of the challenge with some of these laws is that they remove our ability to apply offsite improvements. So we're limited in the amount of improvements that we can require as part of that project.
And then I guess the last thing is the design standards seem to be the stopgap in there. And when we're talking design standards, what does that mean? Does it mean it's not appealing to the community? Does it mean it has to have a certain color? What is actually the definition of design standards that we would be able to apply?
We have to apply those types of standards that are very simple to interpret and don't require any level of subjectivity. And so, there's the obvious zoning standards, which are setbacks and heights and those sorts of things. It would have to be something like, the unit shall have a front door that, faces the street or is parallel to the street. Something that, there's no ability to misinterpret what that standard is. Unfortunately, the way our design guidelines are written, they often say, the unit should have this or should have that. And once you add those kind of words, then you're adding subjectivity to it.
We're adding should, not shall.
Yeah. Fortunately, there's been a lot of work done through some of the regional agencies to put together objective design standards. And so we're combing through those now to see which ones correlate to our existing design standards in the hopes of incorporating those into these ordinances.
And then so on the wild side, I know we have lot coverage standards here in Healdsburg. Do those go out the window with this?
All gone.
All right, thank you.
For those types of projects, yes.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Every question that I had was answered by the next slide. So good job there. I did have one though. You mentioned that the transit exemptions in SB 79, I think it is here, were removed by the Assembly in the latest version. And was it just because it was stretching too far that these provisions were for too large a development? Or was there any chance for it to be whittled down? I mean, you said maybe they'd come back with something different in the future, but do you know anything about how that went?
Yeah, my understanding is obviously there's a very limited time window left to adopt this. So when it left, just before it left committee, there was a growing belief and probably pushback from the more suburban and rural communities against this. And in order for this to pass the full assembly and get signed by the governor, there was a move to remove these tier 3 rail corridors or transit corridors from it. So I think it was a negotiation.
Okay, thank you. And as far as how these will impact or work around our GMO, I'm certainly anxious to find out, what you learn, what the city attorney learned. So if we could see an email on that, once that comes through, I assume it's not going to be too long before we have an answer on that. Is it?
I hope not, but I've heard that HCD has lost staff and they're slower to respond to these, and in some they don't respond to it all. That's why we're working on one that's carefully worded in the hopes of getting an expeditious response. So, and I think this is a pretty weighty issue that I would hope that they would want to chime in on.
It seems possible also around the corner that we'd see more laws coming from the state that would threaten one aspect or another of our current GMO, because it doesn't seem to be in sync with most of this what the state is doing. Is that your guess on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think SB 79 is a perfect example of just how quickly these changes are coming one after another. I mean, it seems like every year there's a new piece of housing legislation geared towards making it easier to build housing and trying to address the housing crisis in the state of California.
Thank you.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm. I mean, there's not really much that we can do with this. This is just a presentation of this is what's coming down and this is what we have to do, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to deliver those kind of presentations. But as I mentioned, there are some policy considerations within each of these, and we will outline those to present to the Planning Commission as well as to the council. And that's part of why we want to adopt local ordinances, so that if there is any ability for, I use discretion lightly because, you know, we don't have any discretion, but to the extent that we can make these work the best for Healdsburg, we'll do our best to get that to you.
Yeah, I would love to see things like, you know, the housing overlay that we talked about last year and some of these other really robust community discussions that we had, you know, kind of considered as we're looking at some of these things in terms of where to direct this if we can whatsoever. But I will say that I toured, it was a pretty small parcel that had 10 units and a couple ADUs in Santa Rosa, and the developer's redoing it. I toured it. It was actually like, it was pretty nice. It wasn't, you know, I think when you read these, I think I have that kind of reaction to it, like, oh, you go to a very negative place. But the ones that I toured, you know, there's a huge need for this type of housing. And it was, I mean, right on West 9th, off of West 9th Street. So there's no parking on that side, but I didn't see a massive issue with parking because the units are so small. You're not going to have, you know, like we have some of the condos where we walk by and there's 7 cars because there's multiple generations of families crammed in there. So anyway, it was just an observation that I had, but I really wish that we had a little bit more control over this. It's just kind of goes to show, you know, Sacramento looks at it statewide and we kind of get caught in it. So
I think locally, River House is a good example of that scale. You know, I think I want to say that was just under 10 units. Had half of them had ADUs in a relatively small parcel. And, you know, they asked for a lot of different variances to make that project work because it doesn't necessarily fit with conventional zoning. But under 684-1123, that might have been a little bit easier to get a project like that through the process with a little bit less variances and that sort of thing. So the potential is there for, and I think if you look historically throughout Healdsburg, you'll see these 4-plexes and 8-plexes and, you know, in our existing single family neighborhoods, and they work well, you know, so maybe this will kind of get back to the way things were before there was zoning that limited to only single family. So.
Councilmember Kelly?
Thanks for this. And I think, you know, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues that clearly Sacramento and, you know, our statewide housing crisis is coming soon to zoning and land use efforts near us. I also just wanted to mention, I think, you know, I received an email earlier today as a SMART director about the SMART owned land up and down the corridor. So even though Tier 3 rail was removed from SB 79, the agency owned land is still included. So because SMART owns large parcels in Healdsburg, that'll definitely still be something that we'll be interested in going forward. And this, you know, applies to Petaluma and all the other places they own large parcels of land for development that they may, you know, partner with developers on doing if they're not using it for a rail storage yard or fixing trains and whatnot. So that'll be of interest, I think, because I think there is a desire on the part of the agency to leverage some of that land to develop it into housing. There was a presentation, I think, recently from our friends at Generation Housing that we have, I think Sonoma County has identified that we're deficient like 34,000 housing units that our economy needs to continue to be able to grow and for people to not live in the type of housing that Councilmember Higley mentioned, where, we have multiple generations or multiple families crammed into one home with overcrowded housing, and that people want the dignity of living in their own housing unit, not to mention, people who are unable to afford to live here and move away, and that doesn't help our economy either. So I think just with respect to how we implement some of these, so you talked about the timeline and when it's going to come back from the Planning Commission. I'm not certain, do we still have an engaged housing committee, the Housing Element Work Group? Are they still intact or doing any work? And would it be helpful at all to engage that group on some of these policy issues? Is that a part of that plan?
I believe they received a proclamation and a thank you for all their hard work and efforts, but that they had worked through their work list. So that doesn't mean that we can't reach out and to citizens throughout the community, and hopefully people will get involved in the Planning Commission workshop and in the hearings at the Planning Commission and City Council level. So.
Got it. So at this time, we don't have a housing committee or housing group other than obviously the Planning Commission that'll be working on this effort.
That is correct.
Okay. And then how does this interplay with the grant that we got from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to do that station area planning work? So will there be sites that are identified in that study where we're looking at, for multifamily sites or otherwise, or it's the zoning that may change based on that land use planning exercise? And then if something's zoned multifamily, then these things apply to it?
These things apply throughout that proposed planning area, regardless of whether we did this planning effort or not. What's important to keep in mind is when we applied for this transit-oriented communities policy planning grant, it was so that the city of Healdsburg could make changes to its general plan and its zoning to become compliant with this new TOC policy, which we're going to need compliance in order to receive funding in the future. And I think that's not going to just be at the MTC ABAG level, but also at the state level. There's just going to be more and more requirements. So part of that policy is that we look at within that half-mile radius of the smart rail station, increasing densities. And for under that particular TOC policy, we're considered tier 4, not to be confused with the tier 3 and the SB 79. And that requires a minimum residential density of 25 units to the acre and up to a maximum of 35, or a minimum of 35 units to the acre as a maximum. So it'd be a range of 25 to 35 units to the acre would be the requirement. Now there's a caveat in that TOC policy that existing residential development does not need to be included in that upzoning. And so you're looking more at vacant parcels or underutilized parcels for that. And that would be identified through that planning process in outreach and engagement of the community.
And is there height associated with that TOC policy as well? Minimum or maximum?
It's more focused on the densities, and there are some FAR factors in there, but that's more for the commercial. That's going to be less of an issue for Healdsburg just because we're not a huge job center. I don't expect to see a lot of office development, for example, here. So no, there's not any height limits similar to SB 79, which did have specific height limits in it.
So if it's 25 to 35 units an acre, how does that compare to like the Randall apartments or what we've seen in that area that's been dense so far?
Yeah, the Randall is, let's see. The Randall is 41 units, and that was on just less than an acre, so 0.86 acres. So that is 47 dwelling units to the acre and a 50-foot height on that building. And then, because it's another good example, the adjacent Mill District project, the condos, That's 43 units on 1.3 acres, which is a 33 dwelling units per acre, also with a 50-foot height. And I mentioned that in both of those cases, that's net density. So when we initially calculated densities for the entirety of the mill district, that's based on the gross area of that original site. And that's why you see densities that are higher on some parcels than what is allowed, because that density was transferred to certain components of that project under the development agreement. But I think it's really helpful because you can visualize what 33 to 47 dwelling units to the acre looks like, and it's essentially 3 to 4 story projects. And you could even have higher density in the footprints of both of those projects if the unit sizes were smaller. It really becomes a function of unit size. You could easily have 60 units to the acre on a 3-story project if they're all smaller units. If you're doing giant luxury condominiums, then you're going to have a much lower density. So, but those are good reference points.
Thank you.
So I add my 2 cents about the concern that we've lost control. It seems like it feels like it happened quickly. But
it started in 2022, and I think maybe parts of us were in denial. We weren't sure that we'd actually start seeing these types of projects. We have seen a few, and we've also just seen ramping up from 22 and 23, and then in 24, just this succession of bills. And if one doesn't work, they're adding new ones in the hopes of, I think, finding that sweet spot that's going to get rid of what they think the impediments to building housing are. And it's not always just local land use controls and all of that. So much of what at the heart of this is the financing piece of it.
yeah, I was going to say to kind of Councilmember Edwards' point, it's kind of a developer question. Like, is it going to be, is Healdsburg in these conditions going to be something that people are going to want to build and make money? And can they make money, right? That's the bottom line here. Because they're not doing it to build just to get us out of the housing crisis. So far, we don't have a lot of interest yet, but.
Yeah, but I don't know how much of the development community is aware of these. I've talked to a couple of developers just to kind of ask that very question, do these laws kind of help entice? And they're like, well, I had no idea about it. But they certainly piqued their interest once they heard about it. So it'll be kind of interesting. Like I said, we have had one. We'll see if there's more to come.
And the SB9, I think you said there were 4 applications so far. Has anything been built?
No, because of those 4, all 4 were lot splits. 3 of those were on pretty large parcels that could have just done a lot split under conventional zoning and our subdivision regulations. But this SB9 offers a quicker, more expedited and slightly cheaper process. So they took advantage of that. The other one is Jessica Pilling's project on Lincoln Street. That's the only one that was a lot split that also proposed to build a unit. And, I think it was at the last meeting, she articulated really well the challenges of trying to do these types of projects, because as a property owner, if you're not a developer, at least it's not easy. It's not easy to go through the process and as well as to finance these. So that's the only one that I have as an example.
And related to the guidelines, objective design standards, is that a separate document that we would be developing, or does it go in with the ordinances that we're working on? How does that work?
It can be both, and we've talked about both. We've talked about doing an objective, trying to convert our design standards into objective design standards citywide, just recognizing that we're losing more and more of that discretion. But within each of these ordinances in the interim, we can certainly add objective design standards. It's similar to what we've done with the ADU ordinance. So for example, if you have a 2-story ADU, if you have a window on the 2nd story that faces or is immediately, a side yard or a rear yard of your neighbor, it needs to be a clear story window, or it needs to be opaque in some form so that you can address privacy, because typically we wouldn't allow a 2nd story that close to the side yard setback. So that's an example of a objective standard that we can put in to help.
On Also then on the SB 684, you talked about tenant protections as one of the caveats for, I guess, not building or, and I wondered about March Avenue, like the fourplexes there. I don't think they're officially low income or rent controlled. Would they be fair game for a developer?
If they have existing tenants within the last 7 years, then they can't. They're not fair game. Is my understanding. So the other piece of that is that for the residential one where it allows it on single family, it needs to be a vacant parcel.
Okay.
So that helps provide some additional protections there.
Okay.
And certainly if it's existing deed restricted, then it's off the table.
Okay, thank you. If we don't have any more questions from council, I'll open this up to public comment. Do we have people who'd like to speak on this topic? Welcome. I could tell the Gen H on your chest gives you away.
Good evening, Mayor Mitchell, Vice Mayor Herod, council members and staff. My name is Sonia Bick-Barwick and I'm a resident of Healdsburg and a member of the Generation Housing team. Generation Housing is grateful for the leadership shown tonight in the important discussion about SB 684 and SB 1123, which open more opportunities to bring housing to our city. As mentioned in the Generation Housing letter sent to the council, it is important to recognize that these state housing laws would only apply to a small share of parcels in Healdsburg, and so we would also encourage the city to consider adopting SB 10. SB 10 would allow the city to strategically rezone single-family areas for up to 10 units per parcel, especially near downtown, the future smart station, and job centers. It would also expand flexibility by allowing modest density increases on parcels that would not qualify under SB 684 or SB 1123. Used together, SB 10, SB 684, and SB 1123 would give Healdsburg a fuller toolkit to create more housing choices and long-term capacity to both meet the needs of the community as well as your housing goals. We are sincerely grateful for your thoughtful leadership and commitment to addressing the housing needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Not seeing anyone come forward. So I'll bring it back to council. You're not looking for direction, or it was just comments, questions, letting us know what's happening?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Any more questions? No. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll look forward to the next steps, I think. Yeah. Okay, and so now we move on to item 8B, Parklet Program Guidelines. Larry Zimmer, Public Works Director, where we're looking to adopt resolution approving the revised Parklet Guidelines. Welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, Council. Yes, we'll be talking about parklets, no SB anythings, and everything is discretionary, so you're welcome. Next slide, please. Based on our discussion on April 7th, staff has brought back revisions to the parklet program. The goal is to have those revisions in place at the time of parklet renewals at the beginning of January, but there is no real deadline. So council could choose to approve as we've recommended. They can make modifications and we could approve the guidelines tonight, or you can have a discussion and direct staff to come back. There's no deadline that we must meet. Next slide, please. So a quick recap. In 2023, council approved the current iteration of the parklet program. Term program consists of the parklet permit, which is an application which turns into the permit, and the guidelines which were attached to your agenda report. Since we have gone beyond the immediate need of COVID shutdown and gone into that business recovery, it was recognized that a relook at the program would be needed, and a 3-year timeline was set at that time, which is what we started talking about in April and we're talking about today. Some things were very clear at our last council meeting, other things were not. The clear direction that staff got is the parklet program is to continue, and we did not want to make it too onerous on parklet owners or future parklet owners so that it would discourage any future building. Other than that, there were some things that were a little unclear or left to interpretation. So tried to strike the balance between meeting the needs or the concerns that we had with the parklet program and keeping it affordable and simple enough for future parklet owners. Next slide, please. So this is mostly just a reference in case it comes up today of the number of parklets we have. Obviously 16 taking up 40 parking spaces. Next slide, please. So our current fees, and we're not proposing any change to the fees, although they do increase every year on a CPI. They're again broken up into two parts. There is one portion which is a set fee for the year on staff time, and the other is based on the square footage for occupying public right-of-way. Fees are collected every 6 months. That was not formalized in the prior guidelines. We've made that revision. There was concern from parklet owners. It was a lot of money coming out the door all at one time. So we broke it up into 2 payments, which we again have formalized now. And the question has come up multiple times about how much money we've collected. This is updated since our last April meeting because fees were paid again for the current fiscal year. Next slide, please. So we're now going into what the recommended revisions are. The first is adding a deposit. And this was put here specifically for the concern that public and council had voiced about vacant parcels. We have one out there, I think that's been over 7 months. And so one of the ways to take care of that is having a deposit. That way the city can go out and actually remove the parcel without having to pay for our staff time to go do that or a contractor to do that. My feeling is that it's much more of an incentive that the parklet owner would be likely to remove it when directed to do so, as opposed to saying no if we have this deposit. Again, it is a deposit. It isn't a fee. They will get the money back when it's not used, which is anticipated it would not be used under most circumstances. Next slide, please. The other recommended addition is a late payment or violation fee. Again, this would be very uncommon. We've only had a few, one repeat offender as far as late payments, and this is mostly to create that incentive to pay the fees on time. The same goes for the required proof of insurance. We have a little bit of problem with that. It is difficult sometimes to get the parklet owners to provide that insurance. The insurance is very important to us. If something occurs in the parklet, we need to make sure that we have current valid insurance to cover any incident. And so again, this would be no fee to most parklet owners, assuming that they are paying on time. The next item is the encroachment permit requirement. And if this is the one I feel most strongly about because it's about safety. When we started this, it was, let's get people out there. It was a little bit of a free-for-all as far as who was working. Were they licensed contractors? Did they have traffic control? We never operate that way. If someone is working in our right-of-way, particularly in the street, we need to know who's out there. We need to know that they have their own insurance. We have an inspector making sure that things are being done right and checking the traffic control. So that's what this is. There is a fee to this. It's going to be roughly $500 with both the permit fee and the inspection fee for a assembly and a disassembly of a parklet. Next slide, please. Oh, I should say too that 137, that is an hour of staff time based on the master fee schedule. That's why it's such a random number, but it isn't random. It's used frequently. So The vacant parklet owners, vacant parklets, we talked about having the deposit fee. And so the question came up of how long should a parklet be allowed to stay vacant? And this was one of them where we didn't really have a clear consensus, or that I couldn't interpret a clear consensus. We had suggested 30 days. 30 days is a pretty short period of time. If anyone wants to do any kind of renovations, they're not going to be able to do it within those 30 days. So this would have to be a pretty clean transition from one business to another to be able to do that. Otherwise, people would be required per this language to take their parklet down, and then the new parklet owner would have to apply for a permit and put it up. 30 days is not anything set. That can be changed. I will warn, is particularly when someone is doing improvements or whatever they're doing when they change businesses. If it's 30 days or 90 days or whatever we set, they're going to come in right beforehand and say, I need one more week, or your building department is slowing it down, or the public works department is slowing it down, or whatever it is to get through the process. We will be somewhat lenient with it, but we really, this is at the direction of council to avoid the vacant parklets. Otherwise, we will have what we've seen out there, which is a couple that stay around for quite a long time. All right, I didn't talk about it on the last slide, but building permits, it came up in email question recently. If a parklet, a new parklet, has a roof, they're required to also get a building permit. A building permit is going to cost them about $200, and it's really just to have an inspector go out there to make sure that the roof is going to stay under certain wind conditions and things like that. Next slide, please. So we talked about the maximum number of parklets. It was originally based on a percentage from the Walker parking study, and it ultimately came out to 70. We had suggested reducing that number. There was some concern of why limit it. I don't know how much it really matters because there hasn't been a lot of interest on new parklets. So we just picked a random number in between the 40 that we have and the 70 that is currently, and said, let's make it a maximum of 60, dropping the percentage from the, just giving it a number. So that's something for council to weigh in on if they would like to adjust that in any way. We also discussed businesses with outdoor space. We did change the language in the new guidelines that allows staff to deny a parklet permit, not required to, but we can deny a parklet permit if they already have a patio, if they already have a parking area available that they could use instead of the public right of way. That was our understanding of council's direction at the time. And then the retail business parklets, it was discussed whether or not that should continue. Did not get clear direction, so we left it in. We only have the one true retail business out there that has a parklet currently. Next slide, please. So these first three items were discussed, but I'm not recommending any changes today, but we can discuss them further if council would like to. The sidewalls, which again, it's how much visibility they have. The visibility is for two purposes. Sight distance is one thing which we don't want to mess with as far as safety of pedestrians and vehicles. The other is council prior in the 2023 when this went through was talking about the connection of the community to the people in the parklet, not wanting it to be in a box, wanting them to be part of the traveling public. So that's what the sidewall requirements were. It was keeping 50% of the space open, and there was some very limits on how tall the wall would be, what they could have, particularly for like wind or weather control, and how it had to be up when it wasn't necessary. Activation was something we added later on because there has been a fair number of complaints about a few of the parklets really not being in use as regularly as they should be. In both these cases, we think our language is good. It is really an enforcement issue, which takes time and is often difficult, particularly over the long weekends when City Hall is closed Friday and Saturday and Sunday. The aesthetics we talked about last meeting as well, and the potential of having like a design review, which is probably not feasible because it is within the public right of way, and knowing what standards would apply. If there are specific things about the current parklets that council doesn't think are meet the Healdsburg standard, we can certainly look at that, but otherwise we're keeping the language as is. We feel that the parklets that we have do look good. There is some issues of upkeep from time to time. And again, it falls back on enforcement, which is going to be a little easier now where we have fees for violating the guidelines. And then the termination language, this is really just cleanup. We felt like it was something missing from the guidelines, so we added it. I don't think anyone would have any kind of negative reaction to it. Next slide, please. So with that, we recommend council approves the proposed revisions, or we discuss and go in a different direction. But thank you. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Do we have questions? Councilmember Kelly, you want to start?
So I had a question about the 30-day vacancy rule. Like, so for example, there is a tasting room on Center Street that shuttered. There's brown paper over the windows. Their parklet that is basically across the street from the vacant lot next to Goldblum Jewelers. No sign, no business is operating. The parklet is there, but there's nothing in the parklet. It's totally empty. It's just like a deck with sidewalls. And it's been that way for some time. What happens with that vacant space under the currently, and what would happen going forward?
Currently, they are paying their fees and they have provided insurance. So we're covered as far as that goes. It is, again, tenant improvements, or they're not ready and we don't really have any kind of means of enforcement other than revoking their permit currently.
And then what would happen if the new rules were in place now?
If the 30-day were in place, we would be sending notice in advance of the 30 days saying, hey, you must remove this. And in most cases, again, if they're doing tenant improvements, they know they're not going to be ready in 30 days. So a couple options. Staff would be very open to other means of activation. If they wanted to, had art, basket weaving, whatever they wanted to do. If they were using it in some way, I think council would most likely be okay with that. If not, then yes, they would have to remove it. And the new owner, the new parklet owner, would not just get the new permit, they would have to come and apply again, and they would have to rebuild it, even if it were the same material, rebuilding it. And if they did not, we would have the means, the funding, using their deposit to remove it.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think this is something we should get a little more clear on as we discuss this tonight, just because I know, businesses are going to change. That is the nature of how folks come and go, or folks are so successful they move to a bigger site, or it's not always like they were unsuccessful and they're closing down. But I do think the whole point of the parklets is to activate the public realm and to create these places for people to sit outside or do whatever else, shop outside, taste wine, taste olive oil, whatever they're doing in the parklets. And so when it's just sitting there empty, it's a very difficult justification to say this is better than the parking spots that people are asking for in the community. And so while I know we have, if they're in the process of transitioning to a new business, which for all intents and purposes, it looks like a new business is coming in and it, may or may not be a tasting room or something else that they want to activate it. I just think instead of asking them to tear it down and then rebuild it, that seems like, a lot of waste, but also it just sitting there vacant is a lot of wasted space. And so I think looking for creative ways that we ask them to activate it so that people can engage in that space or sit there or have benches or art or basket weaving, as you said, that I think that would certainly make the area, especially when there's businesses that are under construction, feel a little less depressed. And I think, we're so lucky as a town that we have very few vacant storefronts. We have very few shuttered storefronts. In fact, we have, new businesses coming in all the time where I think, other communities are really maybe experiencing different economic times. And we should celebrate that. But also when these transitions are happening and places are for lease, if they have a parklet, it's also a way, I think, for them to show off what's coming next or what people can do in that space. So I think it would be wasteful to say if you don't activate it during a transition in 30 days, tear it down, get rid of it, but also leaving it there, for the foreseeable future with no notice of what might be happening next, I think really is not sending the right signal to our community who kind of bought in generally on the idea of parklets, but maybe not loving the idea that there's nothing happening in them in a lot of, spaces. I think the other question I just had was around the CPI and the fee changes over time and what kind of notice is given to the businesses so that people don't feel blindsided or that, we're able to work with folks if they're unable to meet the rising costs, or do you feel like that hasn't been a challenge and people haven't raised concerns? Because I know when we originally started the program, the fees were very different than how the fees are now. And I imagine we may hear from some folks in the audience about that tonight, but I'm just curious, have you heard feedback from business owners about the fee structure?
There are certainly a few parklet owners who feel the cost is too much. Others think it's completely worth the money for the additional business they get. We send out notices in advance. We tell them what the new rate is and what their new fee is. I don't know exactly how far in advance. It's a month or so. They know there's a CPI. They've been through it for a few years now. So it's not a huge surprise. It's just really a matter of how much.
Councilmember Hingley.
I had a couple notes in here. So under program limitations, there's a date that says in 2028. I guess there's going to be another review or something like that. To me, it seems like why not just let it ride as everything's being renewed on an annual basis. Things are going to pop up. So when something pops up, bring it to council. We need to make this little tweak here or not. I'm just curious why that is in there, because I think it is important. And part of the reason that we have such quality parklets in Healdsburg is because the business owners can kind of plan long term and kind of say, all right, I can invest a little bit more because I know this program is going to continue, versus what we saw during the pandemic with some of these, it's temporary. And then you get really cheap, crappy looking parklets that are just, really bad. And so that was just a comment that I had. Like, I feel like it's unnecessary. If there's issues, it'll come up. We're doing, this is quite the robust little program. That's, you give anything to government, we figure out how to make it super complicated. But the number of pages in this thing is way, way more than when we started. And I get we need all these things, but at the same time, I feel like it's a pretty robust document and program. And as things evolve, as they come up, we can then discuss those versus having this hard date.
I'm sorry, if you could explain, Councilmember Hagley, the 2028 and where that's referenced.
Yeah, it is in, where was that? I think it was in I might have to look for it when I'm done and get back to you.
So could you
in
say
the
again,
document.
as in the guidelines?
I think so.
Because it isn't the ongoing parklet program,
here.
so it's not
Yeah,
expiring.
Yeah, the ongoing parklet program may undergo a thorough program review in 2028 for possible modification. I mean,
We certainly can modify that.
I don't know.
That's completely at council's discretion.
Yeah.
Again, it was 3 years ago that council said we wanted to look at it again. If council is ready to let it go without further review until so asked, staff has no issue with that.
Yeah, it feels like we just don't even need that sentence. That was just one of the things that popped up. Change of ownership. I agree with Councilmember Kelly's comments, and that's one that I've struggled with too, with the vacancy. 30 days, we had a public comment that said, oh, that should be 6 months. And I think what we all struggle with is there's a vacant parklet that there are people that are very sensitive about, like, that are very passionate about dislike for parklets, and it just adds to it. But it's frustrating from my standpoint is that you have this possible space that could be activated that's just sitting there. I think there's a couple things. Yes, I agree, whether it's the basket weaving, hot tubs or whatever crazy idea people come up with. But I think generally like some kind of a art project or just even benches. So people, initially when we started this, it was kind of like, having, places to sit and, talk and social distance back in the day. But I feel like the one that you mentioned right there on Center Street would be ideal to have, some benches or chairs or something so that people can sit and hang out. So that the owner's kind of taking responsibility for activating that parklet. So it's not just an empty box that just looks abandoned. That's what I kind of have an issue with. When it comes down to the technicality side, I think there's a difference between vacant and empty. I think when you're talking about a transition to a tenant improvement, I feel like that 30 days should be if there's no activity with the city about no application, there's something else coming. I feel like that's where the difference is for me when you're defining what vacant is. Vacant to me isn't necessarily just an empty space, but lack of activity on that related to a potential new tenant or the transition to a new tenant. And I'm all for letting the staff or the city manager kind of have some leeway because like you said, stuff comes up, the TIs get delayed, the permit, oh, it's the city's fault, oh, it's my contractor's fault. There's always an excuse. But I do feel like we could be flexible on that. I would like to see, since there's some unclear things, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. I do believe that in that time when it's empty, like stuff is out, that it should be filled with something that contributes to the community in terms of aesthetics or art or a place to hang out or chairs or whatever. So there's two things related to the change in ownership. Let's see. And then the eligible businesses, I think we had talked about this last time, but I tend to feel like, we kind of talked about businesses that have existing parking spaces or existing areas. And I think retail, I don't know if we really need retail going forward. And this isn't anything personal against Skip and Holly and Healdsburg Running Company and everything that they do for the community. However, it's a different type of activation when you have clothing or merchandise in a parklet versus people sitting around having a glass of wine or eating or, that kind of activity. And so I would be open to having that section removed and limited to just, restaurants, bars, tasting rooms,
food and beverage service type use. I think those were my main comments. I mean, just in general, I think it's been a great program. And I mean, even when Rockpile put some tables out front, I love when you're coming into town, you see activity and people just, eating or drinking or hanging out or what. It's just, it's bringing life out into the public versus everything's just like crammed away inside. And I think that's one of the appeals with Healdsburg.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to follow up on that activation. It's as I'm sitting here thinking that we're coming to the end of summer and there's lots of things that you could do pop-up wise, but going into the winter it would be a little more difficult to do that. And I have become a fan of benches lately. I had something I had never thought about in my entire life until somebody had mentioned benches along the Fitch Mountain Trail, and watching the redo of the Healdsburg Elementary School. They put benches out front, and I'm like, what are they putting benches out there for? Yet every day somebody walks by and sits on one of those benches. So they are a really popular thing, and I think that would be good for, if somebody's shopping, they might want to sit down and take a little break and continue shopping, something that would keep it going. I don't know how easy it would be to do a pop-up food vendor, but we would need to get into all kinds of other permit things to allow if we did those pop-up things, whereas a simple bench is clean of what we could do. So I'd like to see something that we could do to activate that a little bit better. And going into the cleanup, landscaping is getting mature on some of these parklets. Are we requiring a licensed contractor to do traffic control while like a grape trimmer goes by along to keep that space?
Technically, yes, and we should, but there's a realistic aspect to that. If it is really just going out to the street to cut a shrub and walk away, no, I mean, they're not going to ask. We're not going to know. It's going to get done, and that's probably the right way to do it.
So in other words, if they see that it's encroaching on the street, it would be wise for them to go out and just take care of it.
Yes, and I looked at one today that I wasn't aware of, and it is both in violation of the 50% rule, and it is encroaching into the roadway. Yeah. And both of those things need to be addressed, and we will be sending a letter out.
Or they could let you know that they're taking care of that.
Yeah, well, it'll be a polite request that you need to take care of this.
Okay. And then on the fees, we're looking at $25.95 fee per year, $1.64 rent. And now we're talking about adding a deposit on top of that. What would be the payment schedule for that? Because a lot, some of these, our wine industry is not doing so great. We want to encourage our small business owners. Is there going to be a delay between the time that those annual fees are needed and that deposit is due?
The intention is that the fee would be paid again once. It is their money. We're holding it as a deposit, but it would be paid upfront at the time fees are due. We can change that. We can change the number. We can ask the finance director about the difficulty of making it later or different, but if council wishes that.
Because that's a pretty big burden on a small business to come up with all that at one time. And it's something they hadn't planned for. They may have done their budget, their business plan earlier in the year, and now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, there's another $2,000 that we've got to come out of pocket for right now. So I would like to see hopefully some support for our small retailers on that one. And then the liability insurance, is that the standard $1 million liability, or is there a different?
That is standard. We always go to our risk manager and say, here's our situation. What is it you recommend? It gets looked at by the attorneys.
So it would vary by size or?
No,
okay.
It's standard.
Okay. On that one. Those are my questions. Those are really the clear, trying to get that cleanup thing going on that, because I think we're seeing the same one. So thank you very much for looking at that.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. The report mentions the language about activation. Can you just paraphrase that briefly? What's in there? Since we're all kind of focused on that aspect of it, and rightfully so, I think. But
it's in use when the business is in use, and 5 days a week.
Got it. Okay.
And, so most of your restaurants are doing that. There are a couple that maybe close more often than that or aren't using it at certain times of the year. Obviously, if it's raining, people aren't going to use it. We understood that and expected that. But again, we are not, it takes a lot of effort to go out there and check to see that every parklet is being in use, even if we just did it on standard work days, obviously, and made the assumption that it's in use on the other days. It still takes time to go out every day and walk around and look at every parklet. And maybe you're walking by at one time and there's no one there. That doesn't mean there isn't someone there a little bit later or after we leave for the day and they're open up at night.
So it sounds like a reasonable policy, and I don't expect there to be anybody walking around with a clipboard on that. But if there's ever a problem, at least we have that to fall back on. If somebody's sort of abusing the privilege, I think in the community, those people who are concerned about parklets is mostly because it's the encroachment of parking space is one of the biggest concerns. So if we're going to do that, if we're going to allow that, and there's many good reasons to do that, they ought to be busy. And so, anything we can do to make sure that's the case, I think is important. It may be that somebody can afford to pay the fee and the insurance and have a parklet that hardly anyone sits in. But, if there's any way we could remove the likelihood of that, I think that would be welcome. That's kind of a tough ask, I guess, but just to kind of illustrate, what the concerns are, though. Are there any additions to the kinds of inspections or staff time that's going to be involved with some of the new rules and, on parklets in general, any kind of oversight? If so, is that anything we really need to consider in terms of the burden on your department? And if so, do you think that would necessitate an increase in fees to cover that, or is it really not a big jump?
No, if anything, having the fees or the deposit in place reduce the amount of effort. That's what is hoped in sending the reminders and making the calls and going to visit, saying, hey, you need to take care of this. There's nothing else in here that would increase the staff time.
Okay, good. I think overall this is super well balanced, and I think reflects the concerns that the community has. I have a couple, policy suggestions that I'll throw out here now, and we can talk about later, I guess. But I would be in favor of removing retail as a category with the present usage accepted, grandfathered in, of course, but in the future, I think it'd be better to limit it to wine and food, and for the reasons that Councilmember Higley illustrated. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think that expanding the program past the 40, that's 40 parking spaces, kind of how that defined, right? Okay. I think expanding it past that would be controversial, frankly. I think we're kind of at a sweet spot. Everybody's comfortable with what we have now. And if we were going to grow the program, which, hard to say that there's interest in doing that, but I think it would be controversial, and I would move that we keep the limit at 40, not 60, which is what proposed. I think that adding 20 extra spaces would be kind of a lot to absorb. So that's my suggestion as we get into talking about this. And then I do believe that we should have another review in 3 years. I think there's enough moving pieces here that it warrants another look at that time. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. A couple comments from me. I agree with if we're going to limit retail from this, the one that we have should be grandfathered in. That is the only thing that makes sense, I think, or is fair at this point. But I do kind of think that it would be good to limit it at this point. And also, so the 40 parking spaces equate to what? We've got 16, I think, parklets right now. And I like, I mean, and I know from the time we talked about this before that other cities have, I mean, we're like way more than every other city. Some cities have none, believe it or not. And so I think 16 is a nice robust number that I would like to see it stay at that too, not increase it. Although I'm not sure that even if you said that we could take 60 parking places, if there would be more demand, I guess that's the question.
Seems unlikely.
Yeah. Is there, and what was one of my questions, is there demand for more parklets, or when someone closes a parklet, do people scramble to get that one?
The ones that are in existing, people definitely want to keep them. We have had very little interest. Virtually no one has moved forward, I think, in over 2 years with a new one.
Okay. So it's not really a big problem.
No.
Yeah. So next, so retail activation. Yeah, I would think that, you know, who wants to pay all that money for a parklet and not use it? It doesn't even make sense. So I think from a business perspective, people are using them except for when they're closed, or I'm not quite sure where that problem exists.
But I think there's two things, the ones we've talked about where the business leaves, a new business is coming in, they know they want it, but they're not ready to open up. There's been one other one, and again, I'm not often here throughout the weekend. I'm not often here later in the evening. There's one we receive a lot of complaints about, saying they never see it active. I don't see it active during the workday, but the owner says it is, and it's hard to do much about it.
Maybe we could make him take a picture of it or something every day. Yeah. As far as the deposit, I definitely agree with that. I think that's an important piece because I get that maybe it's a big outlay, but I think the city is at risk. Otherwise, the city ends up having to absorb costs if that isn't there, and the money would be returned, I presume, without interest. Do we have to include interest when we have a deposit from people? No. Okay. So, but yeah, I think that that's a critical piece of this. I definitely agree with that. And let's see what else. And just on the parklet transfer, is that a real problem, or is it just like one or two that we've had issues with? I mean, how does that work?
It can take a while. And we often hear about it, whether it's 2 months or in the case of one, it's been over 7 months. And we hear about it. Now, why is it vacant? What's going on? How can it isn't a ton. And it's not a problem to Public Works as long as they're, again, maintaining their insurance and paying their fees and keeping the area clean, as they're supposed to, then it's no harm to us if it's vacant. We're just following the direction of council.
And so I think to Councilmember Hagley's point, like sometimes those things take a long time, right? Contractors or whatever. So if they were just showing, so if they're paying their fees, they're obviously showing they're still interested in the parklet, right? But if they just showed some activity, what are we doing? What's the plan? Even for that 30-day, which is pretty short period of time.
Yeah, and
we could
for example,
extend.
the new owner and the one that's been vacant for 7 months, they've been great. They talk to us, they check in, but they're not using it.
And that's because why?
Because they're doing tenant improvements and
they're not ready.
Takes a while. They're not ready. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable, to give them that, because otherwise, yeah, you tear it down. I mean, it's a
Yeah, and that's why
we've
never wanted to do that. We
Yeah.
err on the side of let's not waste people's time and
Right.
money.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment real quick on the maximum number of parklets, the 16 we have currently occupying 40 spaces. I tend to kind of favor the staff recommendation of 60. Initially, when we had this discussion, it was based on the Walker parking study, which was now, 7 years old? I think. So we're about due once, I think, fully family pavilion's done and all the work is done. We kind of might need a new parking study, but it was based on percentages and we kind of picked a percentage of a cap and we never got close to that. What I don't want to do is, I've talked multiple times about limiting potential creative uses that we're not even aware of, or potential new businesses that we're not even aware of that could come in, and here we've got them capped out. And so I like having that little bit of cushion. I'm fine to reduce it from 70 down to 60. I think that's a fair number, but I like the idea of having a little bit of room there for something new to come in. Just my thoughts.
Ron?
What is the minimum parklet size?
There is no minimum parklet size. We have gone towards maximum of a business's frontage unless the adjacent business is, very supportive.
Okay, then, yeah, I think the 60 is, it leaves room for reasonable size, maybe 2 or 3 additional parklets is what would be practical in that space is what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, of how many parking spaces? Yeah, it's typically 2. It can be many more in some cases, but yeah. A parking space is 22 feet, so you can do it in one. We've had some, like Izzy's, they're the diagonal ones. They have a very narrow frontage, so theirs is pretty small. So it can vary quite a bit.
Okay. If no further, go ahead, Councilmember
I
Kelly.
just wanted to comment that I think the 60 parking spot maximum as opposed to the 40, I agree with. And I think those were the only kind of up in the airs. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll open this up to public comment. If anybody'd like to comment on this topic, please come forward. Welcome.
Hello, Mark Horn. You might be wondering what on earth could I possibly say anymore? Having looked back at the history of the program, I have to acknowledge that there has been an incredible amount of effort on behalf of the city to come up with a quality program that I think is reflected in what we see, and why some other places they're a little bit, I don't want to say tawdry, but I think I need to acknowledge that. I should also kind of apologize to Director Zimmer because I picked on him in my comment letter. You were the only mouthpiece that thing.
No offense taken.
I could have used the royal we or the city contends or something like that, or even kicked it up to the city manager's office and blamed him for it all. My concern is just a lot of people like parklets, some of them love them, and I'm just hoping that the city will give the parklets a little bit of love back and acknowledge that you're asking for more money at a time when everyone's business is struggling, and that may put some people in the position of wondering whether they want to continue down that path. So, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Jane Portalupi, owner of Portalupi Wines. I just want to emphasize a little bit about what's going on in the wine industry. It is a crisis. We are back to 1970 levels of sales. Vineyards are being pulled out. Grape contracts are broken. Many wineries are not harvesting this year. Production levels are down. So I'm just hoping in discussions, whether it's parklets or what the city is doing, you are going to start to see a fallout that's already happening that we're seeing. So I just want consideration for just a reality check. This is the world we're living in right now. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, Holly Brand, co-owner of Healdsburg Running Company, and acknowledgement to the time and energy put into coming up with all of the guidelines. I know it started out with kind of just get it up, get going. So there has been an extreme amount of effort put in. I understand the fee calculations. As far as the deposit, if I signed up for the parklet today and I knew I had a $2,000 deposit that I had to come up with, that would be part of the regulation. I think for those that have the existing parklets, maybe consider a temporary reduction in fees for the January payment that's coming up, and put the difference towards the deposit, so that we're not just adding an extra 2,000 on top of the 18, whatever the numbers are, for the different businesses. As far as limiting it, the future parklets and excluding retail, I think and I appreciate that you have acknowledged to grandfather the retail that is there. But I think in limiting, putting that in writing, it's going to give the general public the thought that this shouldn't be here. We don't want retail anymore. Where in what we've created with the parklet, you talked about benches. Our entire parklet is surrounded with benches. In the morning, there are groups of people that come and sit and have coffee and talk. Evening runs that we gather, community events, people come. So it's, I think, consideration beyond the type of business as to what that parklet is used for and going to be used for. It's for the community, and I think giving the feeling that no more retail is not an inclusive community feeling. As far as the insurance, we always have our policy. Our agent renews. We've got everybody listed that needs to be listed, from the parks to the city to landlords, and we send it into the city. But I feel like we send it in, Erica sends it in, or an agent, we send it in, we're asked for it again. Is there a centralized housing place for business insurance once you receive it, is a question. And then the other is maintaining the water, which I know we've worked on this in the past. Just seems to run downhill, and I know that streets can flood. They've flooded out here. We try. And so, but I know there's been a little problem with water and gathering when we have torrential downstorms. We're out there at midnight sweeping the leaves that have fallen from the trees. So suggestions on that I'd be open to, how we can prevent that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? You just got here. Welcome.
I've been listening.
Oh, good.
Hi, I'm Mark McMullen from Parkland Farms. First of all, I want to say that I'm a very big supporter of the parklets. I think that they're a great addition to the city. I'm sorry that some of them have gone away, but I appreciate the ones that are here. I want you to think about the future. Do not limit the parklets or what we're doing here, because we're going to have the SMART train here. We're going to have a big boon in business, and people are going to want to come and put businesses here and possibly put in parklets. So think about where we're going with this as opposed to where we've been or where we came from. I think that having retail, excuse me, is good. Let the businesses determine what are there. Don't just limit it to wine and food, because perhaps artists want to be there. Perhaps they want to do maker spaces out there in front of the galleries. Think about the other things and about how this can be a much more robust program than what we are just limiting to in our little minds right now. It's about the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to say that there is a concern as a business owner, and I think a lot of us that have businesses, especially because we all basically know each other now. I've been here, part of the community, for over 10 years, and I do have one of the smallest food places in town. However, it's been an amazing place for us. And as you guys know, and as my friend Jane Portalupi said, this is a really hard time right now for food and wine and hospitality as well. I mean, I've been here more over 10 years and I haven't seen this slow times like I have before COVID like this. So I believe that also the fees of administrative fees that we are getting charged for the parklets are getting raised every single year. But I don't see anything being done on helping us clean, like my friend over here said from the running company, help us clean the leaves at the end of the night. You know, I'm there at my restaurant until 3 a.m. sometimes working. And I see the sweeper coming in, just barely passing by and doesn't pick up after leaves. The trees are not for us to maintain. We do our best to maintain our parklet spaces clean, so no rodents go in there, so nothing happens. So it's nice and safe for our customers to come in and enjoy the beautiful time in this wonderful weather that we have. But I do think that administrative fees keep going up higher, and we don't see anything being done for us as well. So, you know, we are small family businesses that we do this because we love what we do and we cherish being here in this city, which is beautiful. I live here too. So I just would like to see a little bit more clearness on where those funds going and what are they being used for. Because I hardly see anybody from the city going out and visiting us, knocking on the door saying, do you guys need something? How are you feeling? We don't see that at all. And I think all the business owners can tell you the same thing, but I'm going to be the person that outspeaks it because I've seen it for over the last 4 years. And I hope that we can keep going with this program because it's an amazing program. Matter of fact, I think our city benefits from it because people love being outside. And so, like I said, I'm here to help the city. I'm always willing to work with anybody and just let us know what we can do there to help all our business owners up and keep thriving as a city. So thank you so much. A wonderful day.
Thank you. Anyone else? Excuse me. Not seeing anyone, we'll bring it back. Comments, questions, further questions from council? Ron?
Yeah, hearing that and even thinking of a business that has one parking space for parklet has the $2,000 deposit, the same as somebody having 4 spaces. And I just think the time that it takes, the scale of the business, that we really need to figure out a way to make that deposit. So since it is a new fee, that some time to adjust for that, because I think we already, a deposit is to encourage behavior. And I think that seeing this, we've got a few operators. It's not like we have 50 parklets out there, that we can encourage this change and then maybe give a little sway to slowly work in that deposit fee. If we could do something like that, hope to get some support.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Is there a place that insurance certificates, I've had this issue with other clients of mine, that you get asked for it 500 times and you finally have to call your banker and tell them I sent it to you. Is there a
This is the first I've heard that.
Okay.
So I will definitely look into it to see if it is coming from more than one place. It's typically, as far as I know, for the parklets, it's a member of my staff who sends out the letter and requests it. But, we do have admin services person who manages that. So it's possible that that's true, and we will figure that out if that is a problem and straighten it out.
Thank you. So I think there's a couple of questions that we need to clarify that council wants. So the number of parklets, the number of parking spaces for parklets, I was saying keep it where it is, but I understand and hear the reasoning for allowing more potentially. So going to the 60, are you recommending 70 or is that the percentage?
70 is the current. And I would
current.
just pick something lower. And so we went with 60, which again, it's not based on anything real. It was just a number between 40 existing and 70, the maximum current.
Okay. So what does council think about that question?
I think it's a good number for today. I think we need to look at the context, and maybe we haven't had a lot of applications coming, because of where the economy is right now. So we have to kind of look at it from a bigger picture. So I like having that little room. I mean, this is the kind of thing we can always update.
Yeah.
So
in 2028.
But I think having having a little room, I think 60 is fine.
You already said you agreed with that.
So just, I'm a little confused. The 70 is what do you mean when we're at now?
That's the current maximum number in the current guidelines.
And 40 parking spaces?
40 is the number that are currently being used.
Understood. I'm okay with 60.
You guys okay with 60?
Yeah, I'm okay with 60.
Okay.
I won't fight it.
Okay. So 60 is the new number. We also talked about the 30 days and making some changes to that. And I'm not quite sure how you would do that. I'm not sure exactly what we're asking for that, Chris.
Maybe it's just a hopefully simple process of easy extensions to that period. I mean, I think that period does set a good boundary, a firm guideline that I think serves an important function, but there's going to be a lot of cases where people need more time, and it's just, as long as we can make it easy for them, I think that it'd be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we're discussing this, I started thinking about it. It's really not a massive amount of these things that happen. I mean, we only have 16 parklets, and the majority of them have been staying. They're good partners, great, businesses. I think, when we do have this, kind of turnover happen, like it happened with where the olive oil company is now, and where on Center Street, where the same thing is happening. I think really just I like the idea of being able to extend it as long as they're working with the city, but just have something in there like you can't just leave it abandoned. I think that's really what's frustrating for a lot of the public is it's just abandoned. So whether it's benches or art or something, I think there's flexibility, but I think some kind of, I don't know how you put intent or without creating another 10 pages of regulations, but something that to me, I would be open to just something that's just like, clean and not abandoned is fine.
If I may add
please.
a suggestion there. I'm hearing that as something as simple as benches or table and chairs out there, council would be considered active and be happy with that. So we could keep the current language, which is 30 days, meaning 30 days of nothingness. And as long as there is some commitment to do something as simple as benches, table and chairs.
And cleaning.
And regular cleaning.
Clean and maintain.
Because we already do, we push the cleaning and the insurance and making sure there's an actual owner and all of that. It's not abandoned. So we don't necessarily have to do a change. I think council's direction, we could go back and define active in a different way. To make that clearer for future applicants. That would be pretty simple.
That sounds good. Ron, you had something?
Yeah, I'd like to see it approved by you. I wouldn't like to see some little plastic folding tables and chairs out there and say that that's activated. I think that there should be some minimal design and safety standards that are approved for that.
Yeah, the way it's currently worded, I think they have to kind of propose a plan of what they want to do. So we can make sure that there's an approval process in that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ariel?
Yeah, so for the parklets that there seems to be an ongoing disagreement between the owners and how often they're being activated versus the reality of what residents are experiencing. Maybe they're only open on Saturdays during the day, or they have tables and chairs set out, but they're chained up and the chairs are folded over, so you can't sit on them. What is our ability to put the onus on those parklet operators? I mean, I think it's been set and settled that we want them to be active and usable 5 days a week. So if someone says it's open, we're using it 5 days a week, but in reality, that's not what people are experiencing in the community. Where do we go on that? Is the onus on the parklet owner to prove that they are in fact activating it and using it? I mean, obviously this is during wintertime, that's going to be a different issue, especially if they have like couches and cushions and stuff. They're not going to want to leave that out. And people might necessarily want to sit outside if it's raining. But I do know of there are specific parklets that continue to be raised where they're just not being activated, especially on Plaza Street, where that's not what the community, that's not what we agreed to, and that's not what the community agreed to. And they're constructed well, they're beautiful, but they're just empty.
We have the ability to do additional enforcement again with limit. I'm not thinking that council is suggesting overtime hours to go have someone out there often enough. But of course we could. But with council's direction, we could push the issue harder. We don't really have a very strong mechanism for enforcement, but we can say we want some kind of proof and see how that goes, if that's council's desire. We've sort of been letting it go.
I think that, it's a tricky situation, and I know people are not intending to be bad actors, but at the end of the day, having these parklets that they're unusable for the community, I think maybe to clarify with folks, with like some sort of graduated communication scale, but that even just having them available for people to sit at, if they want to get a cup of coffee at Black Oak and one of the tasting rooms is closed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because they don't have foot traffic for wine, would it be okay for people to sit there and enjoy the outdoor space? I mean, that's kind of the innovation.
One in question that I've had conversations with has said specifically that the local coffee shop is close enough and people are coming and using it, whether they are or not. I don't know. One option is potentially some kind of signage saying open to the public when business is closed or something. I mean, just throwing ideas out there.
I could see problems with that though, if it's their furniture and whatnot. And
if I'm a business owner too, I worry a little bit about the liability if something
Yeah.
happens within my parklet.
Yeah, because they're responsible.
You said it's open and I wasn't here and someone got hurt.
What is the procedure right now if you're not getting cooperation? Does it go to code enforcement? Is it left up to you to keep escalating it? Or can we add it that, after so many tries, it goes to code enforcement? Because
Well, like for the not paying the fees, it's just been nagging and letters and ultimately me going to the door.
I mean, we're talking about giving moving that 30-day to a little more flexibility. And I think if we are offering some flexibility, we need to have something that a little hammer.
Well, that's where I'm saying, I think the language that we currently have saying 30 days of being vacant, but we clarify what activation means. And if it can be as simple as open to the public and seating, then I think people are going to be able to do that. But then we would have, with the current language, the hammer of removing it if they really were non-responsive. And we wouldn't go there quickly. We're going to give plenty of warnings and talk.
And they could have something like bolted down tables and chairs rather than having to chain them up.
Yeah, or maybe someone has to come in and move them. I mean.
Okay, thank you.
I like the hot tub idea though.
So to keep with some of the questions, the deposit, I think you had a comment or a question on the deposit.
So one of my suggestions is, we have a mature parklet program at this point, and we've seen the iteration where the mad scramble, we got to do something during COVID, fees, people, then it falls off. Others, oh, here's some fees, you got to pay rent, you got to upgrade. More parklets fall off. So I feel like we have a pretty stable, mature parklet program. So I would be comfortable deferring any deposits that are due for the existing parklet owners. But for the new parklets, if somebody comes in and wants a new one, then they've got to come up with that deposit when they apply. And so that's kind of, I think that'd be fair. I mean, I don't know if, for the most part, I mean, we may have an issue or two, but when we're talking about, it's not like we're talking about massive amounts, considering that, what have we collected, $400 some thousand. So I'd be willing to, kind of do what we can to support our local parklet owners that right now are, especially the ones that we have to treat everybody the same, but within that, there are certain businesses that are struggling. And I think, these are parklet owners that have been there a while. I think we can support that and just leave the deposit to new people that are coming in. That's part of their budget as they're looking at launching their businesses.
I'd be in favor of that.
I would too. I think would be fair. So new applications to charge that. And like you've said, we've got good actors already, have done great job on the parklet. So I would support that. Would Ron?
Or could it be something like after a 2-year period of demonstrating you're a good actor that you could get in other words, we don't know what you're going to be like when you're putting a new application in. And then after a certain period of time that you've demonstrated that you are a responsible owner.
Did you have comments?
Yeah, I concur. And I think that if we are looking at, the cities, I think what the initial intent was that you just want the city to be able to have funds available should someone skip out on town and we have to take it down, that we have a fund set aside to cover that cost. And I think we will, based on like a revolving fund with new parklet owners applying and submitting those deposits and not creating that hardship for those who've already, spent, some of the investment that's been made and kind of how beautiful these are, especially compared, as Mayor Mitchell said, compared to some other cities where people really aren't investing those funds and making them beautiful. I think we've really set a high bar at a Healdsburg standard that's nice. And I think that's truly, the benefit of what these original kind of the first round of parklets, the ones that have come and gone, sure, but the ones that have stayed and look really nice, I think they've made a huge investment, and asking them to do more at this point, I think is a hardship that I don't think we have to. I think we can create the pool of funds for the city based on the future ones without putting that on the backs of the existing business owners. So I agree.
Thank you for that. And then the one question about retail, I think we ought to circle back on that one. I think Mark made some good points. I assume that arts galleries are retail, right? I mean, what falls into retail? Yeah. So I could certainly see that we wouldn't want to restrict the use of the potential for that. Because like to your point, having more parklets, we don't know what's out there, what maybe could be there. So from a retail perspective, to me, I think we don't want to limit that either. So I would keep it in there. That would be my, yes.
I could see something even like a expansion of a toy store where you have children's workshops that would take place on those parklets. We don't know what's going to come in. That's the beauty of the entrepreneurship of America, is that somebody is always coming up with a new business idea. And for us to sit here and limit that, I think is not appropriate.
Yeah. Chris? Vice Mayor?
I guess I'm probably going to follow along with that line of thought. But on the other side, I mean, what happens when a retail parklet comes along that just seems kind of weird, and we don't have a good method for saying that doesn't fit in our community. And I can't think of a good example right now, but I'm sure we probably could if we sat around for a moment and thought about it. So what about that?
But wouldn't that be the overall business itself? I mean, I can't see that a business would be approved and yet their parklet wouldn't be an approved going along with that business. Because if it's, we had a gun store, that wasn't appropriate. So we didn't have that type of business, and it was determined at the business foundation point of it, rather than, okay, we've got an approved business now, we're not going to approve your parklet.
Any comments from this end? No. So are you okay with that?
I mean, the only thought that I have is there's a difference between clothing hanging on racks in a parklet and, like Mark was saying, or that you mentioned, like, some activity. Like, to me, it's the activity is the key. The people hanging out, the people doing stuff, it's about activating the parklet, not here's a yard sale in a box on the street. So I think that, I don't know how you navigate that, but that's kind of where my head goes. I want to see activity and people. I want to see life there. That to me is what is attractive about the parklets, not more space for retail stuff to just sit.
Totally agree with that, but so far that hasn't happened either. So, and you do see that on Healdsburg Avenue where they have the sidewalk sales, so they don't need a parklet for their racks of clothes. They just put them out. So I don't know. I guess if it got crazy, we come back and talk about it more. more
You know, I
limits.
get concerned sometimes just in terms of fairness because, some businesses have the opportunity to have a parklet, some don't, for just based on their location and the kind of business they have. And, there's a lot of good that happens certainly at the HRC parklet, but I don't want this to be an opportunity just for someone to have a larger footprint because they have a special opportunity that maybe their neighbors don't. And so I think I'm going to stick with a no on retail because of that.
Fair enough. But I think we've got more people who are okay with the retail than not. Yeah, okay. Leave it in.
Okay.
And I think, were those that's, and from my notes here, that those were the questions that we had. So we talked about the deposit, the retail, 60 parking spaces, activation, and the 30 days.
That covered all of my notes as well. So
Okay.
I'm looking at 3 changes to the current parklet program. One will keep the 3-year relook at the program. So that would be by January of 2029. So we would look at it again in 2028. So we'll make sure that the language is correct if it's not. The language regarding activity that's acceptable in what would otherwise be a vacant parcel during the transfer. We will add some additional language, but we are going to keep the 30-day language in there in case we do need to enforce it. And then no deposit for any of the existing parklets, but we will keep it in for new ones. I'm not sure that it would work like the rotating thing, but I think it's harmless either way. It just becomes a staff cost if we had to remove one. Right. It's not the end of the world if we don't have that deposit. Other than, again, we don't have, it's not the same incentive, but
yeah,
no harm.
That sounds right. And I think the reminder of the economic situation that we're in now with a bit of a downturn and all that, we're sort of kind of almost going full circle to why we did parklets to begin with. Hopefully we don't get to that point, but I think that recognizing that's an important piece as well.
So if council would like to approve it with those changes, we can do that. Otherwise, we can revise it and resubmit the final document for council approval on a consent item in the future.
Okay, before we do that, Ron has something else.
Yeah, I'm just curious, if we were to have to remove a parklet, wouldn't we invoice that? I know we might not collect it, but would we have the ability to invoice them for that removal?
So part of the reason this came up was we had one business that went out of business. They just disappeared. And so we couldn't reach them. The parklet was left on the road. It took a while. Ultimately, we got the property owner or the new tenant to remove it, which wasn't really their responsibility. They didn't put it in. They weren't the parklet permit holder. And so just trying to avoid that from coming up again. But again, like I said, the worst case is it's going to be Public Works crews go out there and remove it, and it would just be a staff cost.
So to your point about adopting a resolution approving the revised parklet program guidelines with the changes that we've discussed.
Yeah, again, it's whether, I'm just asking if council wants to look at it again or you're okay with it, and we'll move forward with, I think your direction is clear.
I don't want to look at it again. Do you guys? We trust that those will be made according to the discussion. So do we need to adopt a resolution? Yes.
Motion would be to adopt a resolution to adopt guidelines with revisions consistent with direction given by council to staff.
So moved.
Second.
And could we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that work. You guys have done a great job. Okay, so we'll move on to City Council Subcommittee to interview Planning Commission applicants, Mayor Mitchell and Raina Allen. So what's Mayor Mitchell doing here?
So I do not have a formal presentation for you this evening. The requested action is to appoint a council subcommittee to interview the applicants for the Planning Commission, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I guess I would have a question is about, in the past, we've had questions, standard questions that we provide the subcommittee to ask each applicant. Would we want to do that again here? And if so, could you provide those to whoever the subcommittee is?
Yes, I could go back and look at some of the standard questions we've come up with in the past and provide those to the subcommittee. Or if there is something that you guys want to discuss tonight that you want to ask the applicants, you can do that and I can write that down.
Okay. Are there any specifics, Aria?
I know in the last round, I don't actually know if it was the last round or the round before that because it's so hard to keep track of these, but Mayor Mitchell and I sat on a panel and we had talked about, asking the applicants about the growth management ordinance and kind of housing related policy, kind of generally speaking. And so I think obviously Measure O is not a relevant question to ask, but I wonder if it would be the council's will to ask a question about like what are you applicant, what are your thoughts on all of the new state legislative housing measures that are coming out and being kind of thrust upon cities? What is your opinion on, the kind of state's direction on being, aggressively pro-housing as it relates to SB 9, SB 10, and just get a sense from them. I know this isn't a housing committee, but it will impact kind of changes that are happening with respect to the city and get the applicant's read on if they're kind of where they lean with respect to changes, local control, housing, and zoning changes in our single-family residential neighborhoods.
I mean, it seems like it would be more, what is your understanding of the bills versus opinion? Because I mean, there's not a whole lot that we can do on some of that stuff related to that.
What is your opinion and understanding of it? I mean, I think
I like
telling
that.
for me, if somebody was like, I'm furious and I don't think we need more housing in Healdsburg, what are these people in Sacramento thinking? I mean, that'd be an interesting thing to learn from someone who's going to be interpreting these things on the planning commission. Now, maybe they're going to say, I wish Sacramento would do more and I wish they would, it would just might be an interesting way to hear where someone sits on that, local control versus Sacramento, tell us what to do spectrum, and also what's happening here and now versus other cities in the community. Just a suggestion to kind of throw something in there.
Get there with a more general question though, just about like, what's your view of, the rules and laws that promote or inhibit housing, statewide, community-wide, and just give that person an opportunity to dive into whatever is there's a lot of different directions you could take that. And I think you probably would get a good sense of what their philosophy was.
I think narrowing it into a little bit more of your understanding of these new regulations and how it affects the decisions that are made on the Planning Commission, because it's understanding the role of that commissioner. And that, I think that's really what we're getting at is, do you understand how these new laws are going to affect your role in the Planning Commission is really key, because we don't want somebody thinking that, well, I can override these regulations or I can change this, or like Councilmember Kelly said, I'm pro-housing or I hate housing. It's how you're understanding this affects your job on the Planning Commission.
Councilmember Haley?
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts too in terms of, kind of what I would be looking for is, the time somebody has lived in Healdsburg or this area to me is pretty relevant. I would like to see somebody that's pretty grounded in the community. It's been here a while. I think, real estate development, architecture, design, those areas are important for this position. Should be able to read a set of plans. I think there's some basic minimum requirements that I feel that for me personally are important that I kind of would like to see. And experience with our local planning department, to me, would be a plus. If they've had to navigate through our local department, I think that's definitely a plus. If somebody's sitting up here. And then finally, familiarity with our goals, general plan, et cetera. To me, that's crucial as well. Because I know in the past, we came up with a question that, the reason there's a question there, have you ever attended a planning commission meeting? Was we did tend to get a lot of people that, I want to get back to the community. I appreciate that. That's a real noble thing to do, and it's really important. We need it. But when we're talking about planning commission, there's some really big things coming down the pipeline surrounding the smart station. And we've got some really good planning commissioners that have experience that's pretty extensive that I think is very valuable. So that's just, I'm not volunteering to be on the sub panel. I'm just sharing my thoughts of what is important to me in a planning commissioner, and I'll just leave it at that.
Can I offer some input I heard from somebody, and I'm not sure if this is really accurate about the present commission or not, but I'm just going to share it just out of fairness, and I think it's a reasonable thing. This person said that the planning commission was not really focused so much on some of the construction basics and impacts that builders are having to work with in terms of, and the example given was that somebody came with a project and there was a lot of cosmetic sort of suggestions. Was that a real consideration for the time, the money, and the kind of stuff that would be, difficult to shoulder for this applicant or something like that. So, I mean, it's just good to see both sides of things, right? If that perspective is in fact missing, it's just something to keep in mind, whoever's on the subcommittee, I think.
If I could add in, Councilman Haig, you're wanting them to be familiar with our planning department, but I don't want them too familiar with the planning department that it would cause a conflict of interest on some projects.
I would expect them to recuse if they have a conflict of interest on any project, just like anybody else would.
Yeah,
I appreciate people having experience in our community. Just if you have a conflict, you recuse.
Yeah.
Okay, so good points. Is there a way to put those into questions? It's been a lot of
Yes.
conversation.
Absolutely.
You've captured that.
Yes, and once you decide who the subcommittee is,
Okay.
happy to send those to those two people.
So to the point of this discussion really, which is to appoint the subcommittee, do we have any volunteers? Ariel?
I'd be interested in serving on it if that's the will of the council, but I'm also, if somebody's dying to be on it, I'm happy to step back.
And I think Councilman Hagley would be a
Yeah,
good.
he doesn't want to. Okay.
I'm
Great.
interested.
All right, but I'm good with that, if you, the two of you. Councilmember Kelly and Vice Mayor Herod. Oh, yeah, public comment. Thank you very much. Do we have anybody who wants to make public comment? No pressure. Okay, so nobody for public comment. So do we have to vote on this? How does this work? I should know by now, but I don't. It says appoint as a council subcommittee.
Yes.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I move we appoint Councilmember Kelly and Vice Mayor Herod to the subcommittee.
Second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hagley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Herod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you. So now we have no new business. Didn't we already do that? Council reports on matters of interest occurring since previous regular meeting expense reimbursement reports. Who'd like to start us off? Go ahead,
I'll go. I got to
Jonathan.
spend, last week, I got to spend quite a bit of time on the other side of the dais, doing the reports for both the Senior Commission and the Arts and Culture. And it was really nice seeing, there was a really great presentation at the Senior Commission on our senior housing survey that I hope that we get to hear, because it was really interesting information of seeing how even in our senior population, we have those at the top end, and we actually have quite a bit of seniors that are living in Healdsburg at $50,000 a year income. So that was really helps us understand. It would help us understand where we're going. And then in the Arts and Culture Commission, the nomad issue came up, which is the north of North area, kind of activating that area, because we've heard of businesses wanting us to do something, and it was really refreshing that the businesses did it themselves. So I really liked that, hearing that presentation. So it's nice to be able to see commissions that I haven't seen before. That's it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, do you want to go next?
I don't have anything, thanks.
Thank you. So, Mario?
I attended a community event that was discussing the upcoming ballot initiative that is seeking to qualify for the ballot through a signature gathering campaign for the smart sales tax renewal. And it seemed as though there was a lot of curiosity in the community about that ballot initiative because it's an existing tax that's sunsetting. And so I'm curious how the council would feel about at some point between now and the end of the year inviting Suzanne Smith, who is the chair of that initiative, to present to the council on what it is that they're doing and how that impacts SMART. Because I think people in the community might be curious about what it is and what it isn't.
I'd support that.
Yeah, I would too. I would think they'd want to do that anyway, right? Do they need our okay to do that?
We would probably have to invite them because it is not actually SMART. It is a citizens group that's putting it on.
Right. Okay.
So we would probably need, I mean, I don't know. They may request, but we would probably have to agree. So is there somebody else who'd be interested in supporting that? Yep.
Yeah, I think we all.
Great.
All said. Is there any issue with that?
No, I think we have the council's direction, so we will invite them.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Councilmember Hayden.
I attended the chamber barbecue. It was a beautiful summer, and then the chamber barbecue, and it goes to 100 degrees.
Yeah. Great.
Just like last year. But yeah, it was a great event. And then I also was in Roseville for NCPA's LNR meeting on Wednesday, the 27th. And the next morning, executive committee and the commission meeting back to back. And that's all I have.
Great. I just have a chamber barbecue and I bought a nice hat for that. I don't know if y'all remember seeing that. No, I don't. I think I got robbed. It was rigged for sure. But yeah, that was a great event. They did a really, really good job this year, I think. They always do. And then I met with the county parks director with city manager Kay to just kind of get an update of what they're doing. And they're also looking to extend their sales tax measure. So it has no sunset, I think, right? It's sunsetting and they want to move it on. So
Does that cover Memorial Park update? Is there any news on that?
no.
No. You said it was county parks or no?
It was county parks, but I mean, it was more big
Okay.
general. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And that's it. So with that, I'll close the meeting, adjourn the meeting at